There we go. I'm very Midwestern, so what enormously happens when I'm interviewing somebody, even for work, is we'll talk for 25 minutes and I'll forget to record because we get so deep into it. So thank you for letting me launch that. That was great.
Yeah,
How are
no
you?
problem. I'm doing great. Doing great. How you feeling?
I'm feeling much better, thank you. I got some bad diner food and I had about a week of food poisoning, so we're
Oh boy.
slowly getting back to our feet a little bit. I
What'd you
promise I'm wearing
eat?
pants, guys. I think it might have been the pancakes. I tried like a just a little local diner and it did not agree with me. It maybe got some bad eggs. So be
Oh
careful with the
man,
pancakes, whatever you do.
I've
But I
never
wanted to
been
thank
betrayed
you.
by pancakes.
I know they're one of my great joys. But one of my comforts was I was able to finish your amazing book. Thank you so much for writing this. The Blood Mood Feeds on My Dreams. I've really enjoyed it. And I don't usually say that because I read so many books and I don't finish them or I don't review them. So this was a rare pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
Well, I've enjoyed all your reviews of my books, that's for sure.
And you've got a new one, right? As soon as I catch up, you've got something new coming out.
Here we go. Out now.
Oh,
Whoops.
a Specter wraps on my window pane. Oh,
Yeah,
this is awesome.
let me get this up here. There we go. Yeah, that's out
Oh,
now.
that's
It's been
excellent.
it's been out for about 2 weeks now, I guess.
Oh, good for you. Are you getting some good downloads, some good attention?
Oh yeah, I had a great launch. I had a record number of pre-orders. Very happy with the way it started
Wow.
out. Yeah,
That's amazing. So
yeah.
I'm curious, what is the secret sauce here when you plan a launch? Do you kind of have folks do tons of pre-orders in advance? Do you tend to just do lots of marketing? What's your secret there?
Oh boy, I wish I knew. I just wing it. You know, when it's ready, or when I know when it's going to be coming out, then I just put it up there for pre-order and see what happens. And as far as marketing, I got a little cheap free photo editor online. Got an app for that and played around with it. Had a lot of fun just making little promo pieces. Put them on
Oh, that's
Twitter.
cool.
Put them on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah.
Because you've definitely you've got quite the social media game, and it seems very organic and unforced. Oh, are you just naturally outgoing? How did this start?
I guess I never really wanted to be on Instagram or Twitter until I wrote a book, and then my wife Rita, who was on Instagram, really enjoyed Instagram. Said you ought to get it on Instagram. You ought to put this book on Instagram, because I wrote it figuring maybe a few family members would read it, and I'd hoped a couple of friends would read it, but none of them did. Uh, and which is okay. They're still my friends.
Are they still
Um,
friends? I was going to
oh
ask, or
yeah,
did you
oh yeah,
just get rid of them?
yeah, absolutely. No, no, no. And Rita said, "You ought to put this on Instagram." So I of course said no, like I always do, and then I think about it for an hour or two, and I say, "Yeah, okay, it sounds like a good idea." So I put it on Instagram, and while I was on Instagram, I ran into a guy by the name of Asaf Mayer, who's a writer from down under. He lives in Tasmania now. But he had written a book called Murder in Absentia, and it was about a detective in a fantasy version of the ancient Roman Republic, which was right up
Oh,
my alley.
wow.
So
Because you're a historian.
right, exactly, and an ancient historian in ancient medieval, and loved the idea. So I went out and I got the book and I read it and loved it. And then because he was on Instagram and I was on Instagram, I sent him a message saying, "Hey, loved your book. I'm a writer too." And he said, "Oh yeah, what have you done?" And I said, "Well, I did this thing called The Troll Walks into a Bar. Nobody's reading it, but he said, well, I'll give it a shot." And then he read it and he wrote back and said that he loved it and he started promoting it all over Facebook.
Wow.
And yeah, and so I thought, and he said, "You ought to get on Facebook." And that was like the last thing I wanted to do. And I'd been on Facebook before and didn't enjoy it. But I opened up an account and tried that for a while and didn't really enjoy Facebook. But a lot of the people on Facebook were on Twitter. They said, "You ought to come over on Twitter." So I went over to Twitter in the post Elon days. And
That's a whole conversation.
yeah, it's a whole nother conversation. But had a good time and met a lot of people on Twitter and promoted my book and found some readers and read their books and they read mine and it just kind of took off from there. So now I'm regular on Twitter, even post Elon. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And I make liberal use of the block button, which makes a whole better experience.
So those are the trolls you don't want to deal with. Those are the
Yeah,
negative
exactly.
trolls.
That's right. That's right. And I find it just a far better experience my rule is if I wouldn't let them into my living room, then I don't let them into my timeline.
Oh, I
And
like that.
yeah, so you follow that rule, and it's actually, Twitter's pretty good. And it's
I
a good
think
place to promote things.
you were one of the first people I heard that mentioned this kind of rule where it's your space. You don't owe people
Sure.
into your space.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, why why should it be any other way?
Sure. Well, it's almost like it seems like there's a pressure. I don't know if there's a new generational thing going on where people feel like other people should have access to them 24/7. You should know everything I'm doing. You should know every opinion I have, every fleeting thought.
It is
It's
interesting. I
strange.
mean, people my age, and I'll be 72 this year, just so everyone knows where I'm coming from. I'm
Happy
a
birthday.
boomer. Well, not until June.
You're
Um,
a cool boomer, though. You're a cool
yeah,
boomer.
I'm definitely both of those, yes, and and not afraid to say it. Um, but where was I? Oh yeah, boomer thing. Forgot where. Oh yeah, I discovered when I was teaching at a college prep high school, and I discovered that people my age valued privacy, and right to privacy is it was big with people my age.
Hmm.
But I discovered with the people I was teaching that was not the case. And I found that to be one of the real generational differences between myself and the people I was teaching. And so you're right. I mean, it seems that, there's always exceptions, but it seems in general, among younger people, privacy is not a thing or not as big a
Hmm.
thing as it is with people in my generation. And I would tell them, in class, I would tell them this, and I would say, if we knew that people were monitoring our phone calls, we would be outraged.
Mhm.
And I said, how would you feel about that? And most of them said, well, we're not doing anything wrong. Well, it doesn't bother us.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. So I think
So it's
that's
sort of
the
like,
deal.
well, it's almost like, isn't this the generation where you had those Snowden revelations, right,
Right,
on
right,
phone
right.
tapping and wiretapping and things?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
there's almost, from the younger generation, a collective shrug.
Exactly.
Who cares?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's what I found. That's what I found. Um, when
Why
it was
is
during,
that?
uh, I don't know. I really don't. Um, I think maybe social media has a lot to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Once, younger people are going to find this hard to believe, but when I was their age, we didn't have anything called social media. We didn't even have computers. Um, and telephones were things that were attached to the wall, you know,
Right.
and you couldn't see who you were talking to. And, the phone rang, you picked it up, you got them one at a time. But
You didn't have
social,
something in your pocket that was dinging every 5 minutes with
no,
someone saying, "I want you."
and let me tell you that when mobile phones came out, and I was actually in on the very beginning of it because I was selling cell phones. I was writing articles about cell phones before they were a thing. And
No
then
kidding.
and I worked for a trade magazine that dealt with mobile communications.
That's what I'm
Uh,
doing right now. It's not
was
mobile
that right?
communications, it's digital signage, but I'm working with the trade publication.
Oh
That's
yeah,
my day job.
worked for a magazine called Communications Magazine. It was based in Denver, Colorado. I don't think it exists. I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist anymore. Dealt with two-way radio mostly, but then cellular was starting to become a thing of the future. And so I was heavily into the ground floor on that, writing articles about it. And then when they did come out, I moved to California, started selling them, um, and was one of the first cellular telephone salesmen. Had a very brief career. But
You helped to murder privacy, Douglas. You destroyed a
exactly,
generation. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
exactly. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I
Do you think
was
this
I was
plays into, does this play into why Alex Sutherland, the private eye, is so resistant to some of the new technologies and cell phone and having a website and things like this in the stories?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it does. Now, me, myself, I actually welcomed all these things when they came in, even though I was a little bit put off by what it meant to the right to privacy. But nonetheless, I jumped right in on it for the most part. I jumped in on computers and email at least. I wasn't real big on, like I say, I wasn't real big on Facebook. But once I got onto Twitter, I never been off. I kind of enjoy that. And I
You
was
actually
in,
got me on Twitter
I
briefly
did,
before
I
Elon took
did.
over.
Yes, I
That was
did.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah, that was a lot of fun getting you there. I wish you'd come
You were
back.
the only person who could have done that. You might lure me back eventually.
But at any rate, I got in on email, and it was really funny because I was a teaching assistant when email came out, teaching assistant at University of California, Santa Barbara, where I was getting my doctorate. And when email came out, the other teaching assistants, and I was older than they were mostly in their 20s. I was in my 30s and early 40s at that time. Um, but email came out, and all these, a lot of the my fellow teaching assistants were like, if my students want to talk to me, they can come to my office. They can knock on my
Hmm.
office door, and they can talk. Nothing. I want nothing to do with this email technology. And
Wow.
yeah, they were really resistant to that. And I jumped right in on it, and I could see the application that would have, where I could communicate with a number of students at once in off hours, and you really had a lot of
And provide
application.
and provide the flexibility for the student. And it's almost like if you treat the
Exactly.
student as a customer, it's better
Right.
customer service.
Exactly. Yeah. And even the possibilities then of like having papers turned in via email, I could see the potential for that. And of course, nowadays it's standard procedure, but boy, my fellow grad students, even though they were 10 years younger than me, they were like, "Ah, no way, there's no way." one one of them, and then the internet came out. And I got right on the internet. I loved the internet as soon as it came out. Got into various group sites and that sort of thing, hobby sites. And uh, yeah, that's a very
And
long
you have a
story,
gift
but
for it. I really believe that. You seem to have a gift for it because you bring it's interesting because you are very technological, but you bring an almost old world sensibility of just being decent to people, being positive to people, encouraging people. Don't be a troll. Don't share lots of
I,
negativity. And it seems to be working in an
you know,
amazing way. You've built a community.
I kind of grew into that because I'll have to admit, when I first got into group sites on the internet, I really did enjoy flame wars. I enjoyed them quite a bit. I had a good time flaming people and getting flamed in return, but after a while, that kind of got old, and I got out of that. Yeah. So
Do you
I
think do you think that's part of the problem with the negative side of Twitter or social media is that people enjoy that kind of flame wars a little too much?
Well, I mean, the people who enjoy it too much when they're doing it with other people who enjoy it too much, more power to them. Have a good time. But again, as I said before, I like that block button, and
Mhm.
I keep
Mhm.
them out now, and it's a much better experience for me at this point in my life, anyway.
It also seems like you're at the cusp of so many, even in this story, so many innovative moments in technology that change the world. And it strikes me that publishing itself is going through a transformative moment where
Oh,
indie is just exploding in a major way. And I
this
think you've
is
talked about how it's crazy.
Yeah, this is a really interesting time for publishing. I call it a golden age for readers. There are so many choices now. I can remember,
Hmm.
10 years ago, 10 years ago, seems like yesterday to me. If I wanted to find a book, I would go down to Walden's or Barnes and Noble, and I go scan through the aisles, reading the covers, and I
Oh,
could be
Borders. Do you
there.
remember Borders?
Borders. Oh yeah. We used to have something called Tower Books. Go in
Oh,
there,
wow.
read the back covers, read the first chapter, while I'm standing there, going through books, and then walk away with two or three books. It would be an all day thing. Walk away with two or three books, put them in my bookcase. Um, and you were at the total mercy of whatever the big booksellers were putting on
Hmm.
their shelves. And choices were they were not big. There was not a big,
Hmm.
not a large number of choices. There would be a top 10 bestsellers, and those would be pushed. Uh, and then, of course, libraries. Libraries are great. You could get some obscure books from libraries. Uh,
What's a library? Is this an old technology? I'm kidding.
yeah,
I'm kidding.
that's right. Yeah. Yeah. It's this place where books are provided for free, if you can believe that as an author.
Stone
Yeah.
Age. Stone Age.
Stone Age, absolutely. Um, but then all of a sudden, it was right at about the time that I decided to self-publish a book, which was 2019, right? Um, all of a sudden, there were all these self-published books out there available on Amazon,
Hmm.
being promoted, and suddenly there was just so many more books to choose from, and that was what 5 years ago. Just over these last 5 years, that number has just increased exponentially, so that just the sheer number of really really quality books available to readers now is just it's almost overwhelming now. There's
Because just the other day, well, you can probably see on my little reading desk. I'm working on some reading. I'm glad you mentioned the choices. I discovered Whiskey Leavens through your
oh yes,
Instagram,
oh
and
yes.
I was blown. This is just one of countless examples. I was blown away by the quality. Like I was expecting to see something like this on the Barnes and Noble shelf. It's outstanding quality of the writing.
Oh, Whiskey is terrific, and I discovered him on Twitter, of course. And he had a collection of short stories called "The Devil's Own Piss" and other stories.
Oh, I
And
want to read that. I've heard it's
oh,
good.
yeah, it's a collection of short stories, and the first one is kind of an old joke, but done really well. And you read it and you think, well, that's kind of amusing. And then I don't really read short stories very often, and so I had it. And then every once in a while, like just before going to bed, I would read another one of the short stories. And it took me like maybe 8 months to read them all. But as I went through the book, I found that many of these stories were really, really, I mean, they really touched the intellect. They were more than just a joke, in other words. They were very deep and very intriguing. And I thought, wow, these are great. And so I contacted Whiskey. He lives right over in Santa Cruz, right across the bay from me. And he said, well, he's writing this other book about a detective in a clown college. And I thought, oh man, as soon as that's out, I want to read it. So when it was done, we had lunch together in Monterey, and he came over with an author copy of his, an advanced copy of the book. Oh man, and I read it like in one day, and it was just outstanding. And then he told me his idea for Turkey Dances Death, and I,
What am I reading now?
yeah, oh, and
It's so funny, but it's also smart.
oh, it is that, and that really describes Whiskey. I mean, he is every bit in person what you would imagine him to be from reading his books. And if you've ever like seen him on Twitter or Instagram, he posts a lot of videos of himself. Uh, yeah, I don't want to give anything away, but he looks very much like an old Hell's Angels biker. Uh, uh, and he actually did just recently get a bike for the first
You're
time.
kidding me.
So now he can actually live the life. But
Oh, that's amazing.
he's actually a school teacher.
You're
Yeah,
kidding me.
he's actually an English teacher. Yeah.
I never would have guessed that. That's
Oh,
amazing.
you can just imagine how cool it would be to be one of his students, right?
I think of him as being one of these classic adventurer types that's like been all over the world and like tons of crazy things he can't talk about, you know.
Well, there is that too. There is that too. But he's a little older now, and but yeah, his the point of it all is that his books, for all the surface attention that you would get from it, they're actually deep and smart. I mean, his book on clown college is actually is based on a lot of historical research on clowning.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, and it
That's well,
shows.
and he does the research. Like
Yeah,
he actually
exactly.
he has the facts. He brings the
Yeah.
receipts. You can look it up and study it in the encyclopedia and the Wikipedia. Now we don't use Britannica, do we?
No,
Um,
no, not anymore.
what's an encyclopedia? Yeah, but you can look it up, and it's real facts. It's
Yeah,
smart. You feel
yeah,
smarter after having read it. And those are some of the books that I really enjoy. And
yeah.
I just want to say, and I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass, but I do respect how much work you put into your stories as well. And
Well,
there's an
the research
intelligence
is
to it.
fun. The research is fun. I mean, look what it is I'm researching, right? I'm researching Mesoamerican folklore to discover what kind of crazy fantasy creatures that exist in their stories, or Native American storytelling and the Native American spirits, night owl and raven and coyote and all of these. It's so much fun to research. And it's
And
been
Lord Ketz is based on Quetzalcoatl, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. The actual novel, and I'm terrible with pronunciations, especially of what I would consider to be foreign words, but Nahuatl pronunciation of that particular serpent god is Quetzalcoatl. So,
Quetzalcoatl. Oh, I love
right,
that.
yeah. So I just sort of Americanized it or westernized it into Quetzalcoatl, and
And what
yeah.
what a wonderful way to get people curious about the sort of the pan world literary canon and the myths if they want to dive deper and study and
Yeah, and
the echoes. How yeah.
that came from me teaching world history, and I would do like about a week on the Aztecs. Uh, and when I started teaching it, I had to actually learn about it because it's not something I'd actually studied when I was a student. And so,
Really?
yeah, that's one of the secrets that teachers don't like to reveal, is that a lot of what they bring to the classroom, they have just discovered like in the 15 minutes break, before they had to come and teach the class.
It's like the old joke about your doctor when you ask him a question and he goes in the hall, he gets on his phone and Googles it and then comes
Exactly.
back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like the joke among grad students when we were all learning to teach was, as long as we discover it 5 minutes before class begins, we're 5 minutes ahead of the students. We're okay.
You're the expert. I love that.
We're the expert.
Well,
That's right.
what do you think drew you to the teaching profession? And I have more questions about the books too, but I'm just so curious because I spent some time in educational circles and I was an instructional assistant at Kentucky State University for a while. It seemed like a
Yeah.
lot of writers love teaching for some reason. What was it that way for you?
As it turned out, I did end up loving teaching. But when I was in school, uh, I always felt that teachers were people who never really developed enough security to leave the campus. You know what I mean? They'd been
Mm-hmm.
students,
Mm-hmm.
and they were going to remain in their comfortable environment and stay there, but now be the teacher. So that
Mm-hmm.
was, in my arrogant youth, that was my attitude towards teachers. These are just people who never learned to go out into the world, right?
Oh, what
And
was the old saying? If you can, you do. If you
right,
cannot, you teach, or whatever.
yeah, that's just a horrible saying, but yeah, I used to kind of believe that myself. So then I did go out into the world and held more jobs than I want to talk about. Yeah, many of them interesting, but most of them not. And with always with the thought that someday I'm going to go back to school and get my advanced degrees. I'll go out and kick around. I mean, I was a manager for a Mrs. Fields cookies.
Wow.
I was promoted by Mrs. Fields herself, by the way.
You're kidding me.
Oh
There's a
yeah,
real Mrs. Fields?
there is a real Mrs. Fields. Absolutely. Yeah.
I had no
Uh,
idea.
oh yeah. Yeah. And
What is she like?
well, she was, first of all, when I met her, she was in her, I would guess her 30s. And she was just absolutely drop dead gorgeous, probably still is, I'm sure. And she was as energetic a person as you will ever want to meet.
Wow.
She had money behind her. She married a very wealthy man, and had money behind, but she was one of the hardest working people I have ever seen. She built that
Wow.
company from like selling cookies on the campus at Stanford University or something like that,
Wow.
if I remember the story right, she had a little cart, and then she built up this vast
Wow.
cookie empire from there. So she was just a wonder to watch work. I mean, she had assistants. She came into the store. She had assistants. Said, that light's burned out. Get me a ladder. And it says, delegate that, Debbie, delegate that. No, 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 I'll get
It's
it.
so cool.
Climbs up the ladder, she's changing the light bulbs. She was just a dynamo.
You got
Uh,
to respect the hustle, and I've noticed that what I'm hearing is, when I was in college, I was taught that business is evil, business people are all evil.
yeah.
But when I got out of college and started having lots of jobs like you, I started to respect the folks that do work hard and do
Oh,
build their business,
well,
and
I,
they earn it.
I respect the ones who work hard and earn it. Yes, absolutely. Not all of them do. But I
Sure.
respected her, and she promoted me in person. And let's see what else. I sold radio advertising. I was an insurance inspector. I did just lots of
Oh,
silly
wow. So you
things.
were checking for insurance fraud?
No, no, it wasn't anything that exciting. I was just like taking pictures of houses, you know, that kind of
Okay,
thing.
okay.
Yeah. And so finally, and I was selling radio advertising. I did a lot of that, and I was doing that, and then I started selling those that you run your credit card through, the credit card scanners when those first came out.
Yeah.
I was selling those, and just hated it. I was just miserable, and I said, okay, now it's time to go back to school. And I
Hmm.
had no, first I got the job at Mrs. Fields Cookie. That's right. I was manager trainee for Mrs. Fields Cookies, and you can't believe what an overwhelming job that is. By the way, I was working 12 hours a day. I was at
Wow.
sometimes I was working even more than that when the 16-year-old who was supposed to replace me didn't show up.
Oh my
And then
God.
I would call her and she'd say, "Oh, I decided to quit. I guess I should have let you know."
Oh my
And
God.
and at that point, I decided I'm going back to school. so so I
But no,
told,
the cookies, they broke you.
yeah, the cookies broke me. The cookies broke me. The chocolate chip cookies did me in. Um, so I told them I quit, and they said, "Stay on as an assistant manager. You can work nights, and you'll just be part time." And I said, "Okay, I'll
Okay.
do that. I'll do that." So I went back to school, and I was working at Mrs. Fields Cookies at night, in order to finance my way through. Um,
Wow.
yeah. And then so once I got into school, and I decided I don't plan anything. You got to understand this. I don't plan my books. I don't plan my life, right? And
Pantsing, right? This is the
yeah,
pantsing you
exactly.
talk
Yeah,
about.
total pantsing. Yeah, the seat of my pants. So I decided I'm going to go back to school. I had no idea what my major was going to be when I went back. And so I just opened up a catalog and I went through all the different subjects. And, math, no. Uh, you know,
Amen.
Yeah, English, maybe, but probably not. But history. Oh, yeah, history sounds fun. Okay, well, what kind of history? Modern, no. Modern history is journalism. I want something that's old, but not too old. Medieval history. Medieval history sounds good. That's what I'll do. I'll go back to school and I'll study medieval history. And I like Rome too. So I'll study medieval history and ancient Rome. Okay. So that was going to be the deal. So I went back to school and I'm working on a master's program. And then I discovered there's no reason to get a master's in history. It doesn't do you anything, right? Except for just the
Yeah.
fun of it. And if you're going to do anything, a professor told me, if you're going to go for a master's, you should go for a PhD. And I said, well, what can I do with a PhD? And they said, well, you can be a professor. And I said, you mean teach? Teachers, people who don't have the wherewithal to get off a campus. They say, yeah, teach. You can teach. You can do what I do. And I said, well, teaching college though, that sounds like it might be a good deal. So I worked toward that and got my PhD. Taught college, loved it as it turned out. And then I found myself in Kansas, and sorry for anyone who likes Kansas, but I didn't. Okay, Kansas was not for me. I was there for 4 years. I enjoyed my job, didn't like living in the state. And I'm a California boy. I'd been out of California for 4 years in Denver, and now I was out of California in Kansas for 4 years. Uh, I had to get back to California. I said I'll do anything to get back to California, and what that ended up being was a job teaching at a private college prep school in Monterey, California. And so I did that, loved it, did it for 15 years until it was time to retire. Then I retired. Then I became a writer.
You know, maybe like the Gilmore Girls, like Lorelai's going to the private prep school and so forth. Was it kind of like that atmosphere?
Well, I never saw an episode of the Gilmore Girls, but
It is very good. Shout
yeah,
out Gilmore Girls.
yeah,
Oh, yes.
maybe I should try that. Yeah,
Very clever.
but I enjoyed it because it was an all-girls school as it happened. Yeah, so I taught in an all-girls college prep school, and just I have so many stories I could tell. I could keep you here for 48 hours straight, telling you the
What
stories
was the
about.
best part, do you think?
They were so eager to learn
Hmm.
and so into it. I mean, they might not want to be in the classroom at that particular day and time, right? But they all were headed to college, and they all
Hmm.
wanted to get there, and they all wanted to excel, almost without exception. Yeah, they were all very motivated. So teaching students like that is like stealing your money.
I
Okay.
love that.
Yeah.
Because teaching,
Because
I've told people, teaching is the best high that you'll ever experience when it goes
Yeah,
well.
when it goes well. Yeah. Now my sister taught at a school in a depressed area, um, where the students did not want to be there, where their parents didn't
Hmm.
particularly want their students to be there either,
Hmm.
where they were not motivated, where the students were very tough. She had to spend the beginning of every school year confiscating knives and other weapons.
Oh my
Um,
God.
and my favorite story was her first year of teaching at that school. She was just on a 1 year contract, and she had been given the opportunity to go on as a permanent teacher on a permanent basis, or she said she could just substitute. So she was considering it, and she was sick one day. Oh, there goes my wife. Hi, Rita.
Hello, hi Rita.
And
The power
so,
behind the throne, the power behind the
absolutely.
fedora.
Absolutely, no question about that. So anyway, she said she was sick one day, and a substitute went in to teach her class, and her students threw the substitute teacher out the window.
Oh my
Now,
God.
now, fortunately, it was just on the first floor. Okay, but she decided at that point that she would become a permanent teacher because the substitutes get zero respect.
Wow.
Whereas,
Wow.
whereas if you're going to be there every day, you have a chance to at least earn the students' respect. And she did. She did a very good job. She earned the respect. But
Wow.
that wasn't going to be for me.
Wow. So you never
That
got thrown
wasn't
out of the
gonna be me.
window, is what I'm
No,
hearing.
never. No, never. No, never.
No
No,
defenestration.
no defenestrations for me. I was the captain of my ship, and my students knew it. But I had a very easy, class to teach, especially once I got to the all-girls private college prep school. I mean,
Now,
that's
did
a
you
whole
only teach
different atmosphere.
history, or did you teach a lot of subjects?
I only taught history. Let me think. I taught history and human geography, which is fairly close to history. I taught AP human geography. Trying to think, was there anything else? I think everything else was some form of history or another. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what could you speak briefly? Because I think I worked for a company that worked with teachers getting their professional development, so they get their credits and keep
Right.
teaching and so forth. They're plus 30, whatever. And
Right.
we dealt with so many teachers around the country who are so depressed, so burnt out, in a lot of negative, toxic
Yeah.
environments, zero resources, zero support. But I think the most heartbreaking thing for me was culturally and societally, they simply did not feel valued. They felt like the
Right.
parents didn't value them. What could you speak to? How can we create more value and start treating teachers better? Because it kind of is the most important job, if you think about
Well,
it.
I saw that happen to my sister. I mean, she retired before I did, and she's younger than I am. But she had just had enough, and you can kind of understand why, given the atmosphere she had to teach in. Um, in in my opinion, it's gotten a lot worse over the years. I mean, I saw it happen while I was teaching, the devaluation of the teacher. And that's because teaching, it became, well, it was always part of a business. It's always been a business. Even public teaching is a business. And not so much for the teachers, but for the administrators, the people in charge. And at a private school, that was especially true. And at private colleges, that's especially true. But even at public schools, it's a business for the government, right? And over the years, the people in charge have become more and more cost conscious. And students bring in money and teachers absorb money. You got to pay money to the teachers, right? And so anything that will bring more money in and cause less money to go out, of course, is good for the bottom line. So students, and especially the parents of students, became more and more valued. Teachers became less and less valued. And I think
so
that's
headcount per classroom is going up as well, it sounds like.
When I was teaching at a private college in Kansas, I saw my college count more than double in 4 years. My classroom count more than doubled in 4 years. It was getting crazy. I started with like 100 students and ended up with more than 200 students.
Oh my
and
God.
it was going to increase again the year after. And that was it. I left. That's when I decided I was going to leave.
And they don't pay well, a lot of these colleges. I hate to say it.
I made a whole lot more at the private high school than I made teaching at a private college. So
Do you think that's it? Because I've had people tell me, why don't you go back to school, similar to what you said? Why don't you get back into education? Do you think you see a trend where people are going to start teaching more in that private environment because it's more valued and you have the students that are invested?
well, now I've been retired now for 6 years, and I haven't really been keeping as close a track of the teaching profession as I did while I was teaching. But the trend I saw was the government trying to get out of public schools, with charter schools and private schools and various other kinds of privatized schools, so that the government wouldn't be footing the bill for education. And the trend has been heading in that direction to, I don't know quite what extent anymore, but that's where it was heading while I was teaching. And it's again, it's turning education even more into a business than it had been before. And what happens much of the time is the people making decisions are people who have never taught in a classroom. So you have people who don't really know what the student teaching dynamic is like, but they know what the bottom line is like. They know where the money is, where it's going, and they're making more and more making their decisions based on those factors.
Well, this ties into me. It reminds me, massive corporations turning something into for-profit. We talked earlier about the book industry before this golden age of choice. And you have people in suits with the MBA saying, well, statistically, we can save 5%, so let's just do this. And it seems to me that when something becomes purely for-profit, just the numbers, no passion, it actually kills the thing itself, the industry, whatever the industry may be.
Right. Well, you can see that in the entertainment industry all around, with the heavily backed and promoted products being revivals or reboots, or they call that when they take something and remake it, remaking old TV shows into movies, this sort of thing.
I think Variety just had an article saying that every major title except for 2 this year is a reboot of some kind.
Right. Yeah, a remake. And, you can, sometimes it works. I mean, but there's not a lot of creativity going on. It's like what worked before, let's do another version of that. So you get reboots of the Addams Family, and I thought at least the first Addams Family movie was pretty good, but it was a remake of an old television show, right? It wasn't anything new.
Because they're scared to invest in something without saying, well, what's the return going to be?
And you get your elevator pitch, and it's easier to pitch something as, here's something that has worked before, so we have a pretty good assurance it's going to work again. That's a pretty good pitch right there, right?
So do you think that this is part of where you got the courage I don't know how to frame this question. As an independent author who didn't have a big publishing house telling you what to write, you could do something so experimental and different, and people actually liked it.
Oh,
Do you think that
absolutely.
helped?
Yeah, okay. This I have a fairly long answer to this question, which shouldn't be a surprise at this point. Uh, when I decided I was going to write a book, the decision was based on the idea that I wanted to write 100,000 word book that I would enjoy reading. And if some people in my family read it, or if a couple of my friends read it, that would be great. But that would be a bonus. And
Except for the bastards that didn't read it.
uh, hey, my philosophy on that is there's 8 billion people on this earth, and I only need a tiny, tiny fraction of them to read my book for me to be successul. So that's who I'm trying to appeal to. Yeah. So that means there's a whole lot of people who can hate my books, and I'll be just fine. But at any rate, so I decided I was going to write something just for myself, something that I would enjoy reading, just for the. I was retired. I had to do something, right? I don't play golf. So I decided I would write. I decided I would write a book, right? So I wrote one and I finished it, and then I said, "Hey, people are self-publishing." At this point, it was still fairly new, 2019. Self-publishing has been going on a while, but not nearly as many people were doing it at that point. Although it was starting to catch on. It was starting to catch on at about that point. And I thought, self-publishing. Let me give that a shot. I don't have to deal with any publishers that way. I can just won't have to worry about anybody not liking my book and refusing to publish it or promote it. So I thought I'll give that a try. So I found somebody named Jane Friedman, who has never met me and I've never met her, but she has wonderful online advice for anyone wanting to get into self-publishing. So I read her advice on getting into self-publishing, and I did it. And
As
then
Jane Friedman, I'm writing this down.
Jane Friedman, Friedman, I believe.
Okay. Awesome. I'll look her up.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who's just getting into self-publishing ought to look her up.
And I apologize, as I'm glancing out the window, Douglas, we just had an ambulance and a fire truck just pulled up to my apartment.
Oh, boy.
So I have no idea what's going on.
Are
I'm not being rude. I was just like a little distracted.
Are you okay in there? Is any smoke?
They found my last victim. No, I'm kidding. Kidding. So forgive me. So when I was distracted by the fire truck, you were telling me that you were reading the advice of Jane Friedman, who had kind of, this is how you do it.
Right, and got into self-publishing, and I loved the idea because nobody would be there to tell me what to do, and also it wouldn't matter if nobody liked my book, right? It was going to be published anyway. And so I churned out A Troll Walks into a Bar in about 3 months. And
in 3 months?
Yeah, I was busy.
That's fast.
Like I say, I had a lot of time.
You have a lot of. What's your process? Are you writing 8 hours a day?
Oh no, not at all. Maybe 4 at the most, but 4 hours a day.
That's
think
intense.
Is my tops. Yeah, about 4 hours a day. Usually from about 1 till about 4 or 5 o'clock. So 3-4 hours a day. That's my writing
time. So you find
time.
the routine helps.
Yeah. I do. Yeah. I run in the mornings, and do some weights in the mornings. And so afternoons were best for me to write. And then at night, I like to, lay back and watch TV or read.
I know so many writers that are avid runners. And at times in my life, I've been into it. I love weights. What is it about running that appeals to you? Because you seem to really love it.
Well, I was running long before, well, not long before, but I started running well before I started writing. Started running in my 50s. Actually, I had tried it a few times before, but in my 50s, I decided I would try it again. I needed to lose some weight. So I thought I'll go out and I'll jog 20 minutes a day, three days a week, And so I was doing that. And then I met Rita online on using eHarmony. And Rita and I are eHarmony success stories. Yeah,
I remember the commercials years ago on the radio.
Oh yeah, we should get a commission from them. I mean, we are their biggest success story. So
it actually worked for you. That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, it worked. Yeah, beautifully. Worked beautifully. And so I was trying this jogging program, and I met Rita, and Rita was a real runner. She had been running marathons.
Wow.
She'd been medaling in races.
Holy
Um,
crap.
oh yeah, she is a real runner. And I
So not
told
mini
her
marathons. This is actual 26 mile, 26 point whatever.
26.2 marathon. Yeah, 20.
Oh my
If
God.
it's not 26.2, it ain't a marathon. Um,
That's
and
amazing.
yeah, and she's run some 50 Ks too, which is 31 miles. Uh,
Oh my God.
yeah, so she's a real runner. And I told her, I didn't think this was going to impress her any, but in fact, I thought she was going to be like I thought I was way out of my depth here, but I very hesitantly told her, yeah, I've been like jogging, 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week. I get nearly 2 miles, when I do that. And, and, and she was just so sweet about it. She said, first of all, if you're doing it on a regular basis, you are not jogging, you are running. You are not a jogger. That's the J word. We don't use the J word. You are a runner. If you're doing it regularly, you are a runner. No matter how slow, no matter how short it is, if you're doing it regularly, you're a runner. So I said, "Oh, okay, I'm a runner then." And she said, "What are you running in?" And well, just like my jeans and my work shoes. And she's like, "Oh my God." So so she steered me onto actual running attire and shoes, especially shoes and socks. Socks are important too. Got to have
What
the
kind
right
of
kind of
shoes do you
socks.
recommend, by the way? What do you like?
These days, Hoka. Yeah.
Hoka. I haven't heard of
Oh,
that one.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're the best. Yeah, yeah, they're the
Is that like the
best.
Zero shoes that's super thin or?
They are super lightweight. But
Okay.
they actually have very thick soles, but they're very
Huh.
lightweight soles. Yeah.
I'll look into that.
Yeah. Oh, those are great. So anyway, so she got me into running and to really running. And then she actually got me up to the point where I was running marathons, which was just amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've run three. I've run three
Good
marathons,
for you.
which
Do you
was
think that
all.
kind of helped fuel your, what's the word, your pertinacity to finish your first novel? Because it sounds
I
like the
think
process was kind
so.
of similar.
Well, I've kind of always been that way too, where if I was going to do something, I was going to finish it. Um, although I may wait for a long time before I actually do it. I waited till I was 67 before I wrote a book, but once I wrote it, you know, then I was in. Um,
And by the way, your viral, this was a world viral tweet, I believe, was so
yeah,
inspirational to me. This is where I got interested in you, I think, because I put it on my wall. It really helped me with something I was going through at the time. But you mentioned, life is not on this artificial timeline where everything has to happen in your 20s and then life is over, right? And you shared
right.
all the milestones you've had, and you're looking forward to every new year. And that was so inspirational.
Yeah,
And I just wish
that
more people had your mindset.
that tweet is still generating. I'm still
Wow.
seeing people responding to that. Yeah, that was amazing.
Wow.
But getting back to running, so what I found once I started writing was that I was getting all my best ideas while I was running or just after the run. So running was opening my head up and just really expanding my creativity. And anytime I'm stuck, I find that I don't even really have to run. Just go outside and walk. And that's what works for me. Anytime I'm the least bit stuck at all, I just go outside. And there's something about being outside and moving, walking, running, that just opens up gets the neurons firing, gets the synapses going. And that
I tried this because I've been having writer's block. So you think I should actually just go get active?
Oh, I think you should try it. I think you should try, just taking walks if you're not a runner, or if you want to start running, run. If you haven't been a runner, then you definitely need to work your way into it. I'll give you all kinds of running advice as soon as you want it, if you ever want to get into that. But to anyone who's thinking about starting running, don't go out and run 5 miles your first day. You'll come back with blisters and hating it and thinking, why does anybody ever do this? That's one of the things. You have to start slow and then build up. It's a process. But you can build yourself all the way up to marathons and ultra marathons if you're
That
serious
sounds
about it. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think that would apply? Could we say that for writing as well? Like if
Yeah, I
you're
think
just getting
so.
started?
I think so. Well, let's see. How would I apply that to writing? I don't know. I certainly didn't start with short stories and move up. I mean, once wanted to write, I wanted to write 100,000 words because that's the kind of book I like to read. Uh, and so I just sat down and started writing, and when I had enough words, then I stopped. So,
Wow.
uh,
But it fits
so
together. It doesn't feel like a book that has a lot of fluff. Because I've read books where people just want to have the page count, and it's just so much filler.
yeah, I don't know. I've told you this story before, but I'll tell it again. When I decided I was going to write a book, I went to Rita one day. I said, I'm gonna write a book. She said, okay, go ahead. Because I don't do anything until she tells me it's okay. So,
Good man.
yeah. Fortunately, she almost always tells me it's okay. So actually, she was thrilled. She had kind of hoped that I would write a book someday. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I've been retired for a year. I've been catching up on my reading because when I was teaching, I didn't have time to read except during the summer breaks. And then I would binge read as much as I could. So I was retired, and I just read everything I could get my hands on for a year. And then I was reading a book. I don't even remember what it was, and I thought, I can write a better book than this. I think it's time to put your ego where your mouth is, it's easy thing to say I can write a book. Then you have to sit down and do it, and believe me, it's much harder, as you know, much harder to
Hard.
actually. Yeah, it's very hard work. You got to be persistent, and you have to have the time. And these people who have full-time jobs and write books, I just have nothing but admiration for them because I know I couldn't have done that. But I was retired, so I had the time. And so I thought, what am I going to do with this? So I said, I'm going to write a book. It's about time. I've been wanting to write one like all my life. I'm 67. You've been procrastinating long enough. So I sat down and I said, what are you going to write about? I don't know. I was walking back from the drugstore one day and I'm thinking of story ideas. And I thought, okay, what I'll do is I'll write down 10 first lines, first lines of a novel. I'll write down 10 of them. And then I'll see if any one of them take me anywhere. And I didn't even have a genre in mind at this point. I didn't even know what kind of book it was going to be. I said, I'll write 10 lines and see where that takes me. So I wrote the first line, and the first line turned out to be a really long one about a description of a troll standing in a barroom door. And so I wrote that line, and I think the line has like 120 something words in it. So it's a long line. And then I wrote, I thought, that's pretty long and it's setting something up. I'll write a short second line to cap it off. And the second line was something like, chalk it up to my keen powers of observation, something like that. Then I thought, I bet there's somebody saying this in the first person. He's got to be in the bar. And so I wrote about the troll seeing the guy who's narrating this and walking in his direction. And then I wrote about their conversation. And then next thing I knew, I had finished the chapter, and that became a troll walks into a bar. And I never did write those other 9 first lines. So
Wow.
that was it.
So you didn't even know it was going to be a noir, like an urban fantasy.
I didn't know it was going to be urban fantasy. I didn't know it was going to be fantasy. I didn't know it was going to be noir. It was just the first thing that popped in my mind.
It was pantsing. It was an example.
It was
of pantsing.
pantsing. It was total pants, total chaos pantsing. I had no idea where this. I didn't know that this was the line I was going to accept as the first line in my book. It's just that once I finished the first chapter, I just didn't want to go back and write those other lines. I just thought, I better continue with this. And there are so many things I would do differently now.
What would you do differently?
In retrospect? I think that I would have had at least an idea of what the plot of the story was going to be before I wrote the line, or maybe I would have at least had an idea who the character. I think I would have had an idea if I were starting a book now from scratch. I would have an idea of who my main character was going to be. I didn't have a character in mind when I wrote that line. I didn't know who the character was when I wrote that first line. It was just somebody who was observing a troll. I think I would have a character in mind and a setting in mind. I think with a setting and a character, I can put that character in the setting and say, given that situation, what's the character going to do next? And from there, then I can go. But
do you find, because a lot of traditional writing advice it sometimes goes so far overboard, it says you have to have these massive outlines and all
yeah,
these, you have to write down all these descriptions and things. So it sounds like you don't have to go that far, but maybe a little bit of outlining can help folks get started.
well, every writer is different, and every writer has their own way. I'm a total pantser for the most part, a chaotic pantser. I don't know what's going to happen next. A lot of times I'll sit down and start to write without knowing what I'm going to write that day. I'm in the middle of the book
Wow.
and I don't know where it's going to go. I usually don't know how my book is going to end until I get pretty close to the ending.
You're kidding.
No, yeah. It's fun for me to play who done it in my own head. So I'm writing and I'm thinking it could be this person or it could be this or this could be. I think this is a red herring.
Do you ever have a character that surprises you with something they do?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Oftentimes, a character that first of all, I didn't know I was going to need that character, right? I'm in a portion of a book where I'm thinking somebody else needs to be here. Who's that going to be? Well, given the situation, it's probably this kind of character. And I thought, okay, he'll need to talk to a receptionist, let's say. So I need a receptionist. And in the course of that phone call, something of the receptionist's personality is coming out to me. Next thing I know, this receptionist has become a main character in my book. That kind of thing has happened several times in my book.
Well, I think a lot of readers would say some of their favorite characters, you might have thought they were going to be side characters, but even things like Lubank, the lawyer,
Yes.
and some of the elementals, and there's so many wonderful characters that develop a life of their own. And even for Alex himself, I mean, he started out, you didn't even have him in your initial sentence,
No.
but he has become such a full-fledged, it feels like he's a living, breathing character. And I'm
Well,
curious, does he come from someone you know? How is he so...
He's pretty easy because I've read so much Raymond Chandler and Dashiell Hammett and Philip Marlowe and Sam Spade. I watched the movies, the Humphrey Bogart and Robert Mitchum and
Gotta love Bogey.
Oh yeah, and then I threw a little of my own mindset in there and so he was pretty easy. And I think one of the things that I would do if I were starting over is because with my second book, I started getting more into Mesoamerican, culture and inspirations. And I think I might have given him a more Hispanic kind of name or a Native American name if I had known where I was going to be going. Maybe a South Pacific name.
Really?
I had 10-inch in my first book, right?
I love that character.
And then
he's one of my favorites.
And then when I revived him in a later book, I revived him in Nymph. I turned him into a native of the Fiji Islands or of Tonga. I can't remember which now. I think it was Tonga. Yeah, I made him a native of Tonga. I didn't know he was a native of Tonga when I wrote the first book. Right? He became a
That's
native
amazing.
of Tonga. I had to go back and make sure that it would be feasible to do that. Yeah. But
He's
getting
another
back,
one that leaps off the page, and he becomes so real. And even if he's a bad guy, especially in that first story, you kind of like him.
yeah,
You really enjoy him.
somebody described him as a frenemy. A frenemy.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I really fell in love with the relationship that developed between the two of them. And once again, I had no idea this was going to happen. That they were going to be people who were enemies but respected each other, and ended up sharing a beer in 10-inches loft.
After almost
So,
beating each other to death.
after beating each other almost to death, yeah, just on the verge of death, and then calling it quits and sharing a beer and saying, "Yeah, next time, I'll probably kill you." But getting back to a question you asked quite a while ago, I love the way this has been going. I don't think I've actually answered a single question you've asked,
Oh,
but
wonderful. We're pantsing. We're pantsing
Yeah, we're
an interview. I
pantsing.
love it.
but I'll try to get to the answer to this one. You were talking about outlining versus pantsing, and there are a lot of people who must outline, and that's the only way they're
Sure.
going to be able to write a book. and that's fine. That's perfectly okay. Some people need to write extremely detailed outlines. When I was writing my nonfiction stuff, when I was studying for my PhD, and I was writing papers, I had to outline them almost to the point of being completely written in order to be able to write the article. And basically, all I
Wow.
did is just kind of flesh out the outline a little bit, and then I had my article. So I know what that's like, and a lot of people need to do that when they're writing their fiction. And because pantsing it's not conducive to their style. I mean, it's not the way they write, it's not the way they think, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. It just doesn't work for me. I can outline nonfiction, but I can't outline fiction, because if I try to outline fiction, two things happen immediately. Okay, I'll outline my first topic, and I'll immediately want to flesh it out into a paragraph. And then I'll go to my second topic, and I'll suggest what my second topic is going to be, and it will require me to go back and revise my first sentence. And then I'll revise my first sentence, and the second topic will now be obsolete, and I'll have to come up with a new second topic. And I would be stuck just rewriting that first paragraph over and over again if I tried to turn it into an outline. So it just works better for me to just
Well, I
write
wonder if you
it.
relate so much to what you say. I wonder if you relate to me when I'm writing and something starts going very well and it starts taking on a life of its own. I've told folks I'm watching the movie and
Yes,
I'm writing the movie down so you can watch it with me. You know?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I see it as a movie in my head while I'm writing it.
Mhm.
Hi, Rita. Come here, Rita. Come here. Come here. Come here. We're gonna make you a podcast
Oh no,
star.
she's being shy. Oh no,
No, she's
she's the
not shy.
celebrity guest. Hi,
Hi,
Rita.
Rita. This is my inspiration, my co-editor, my sounding board. My writing method consists of writing, like I say, for the afternoon, and then immediately after dinner, then Rita will come in and she will read what I have written out loud while I look over her shoulder, and we will edit the work together. And we
Wow.
pick up so many great ideas, and she catches all kinds.
And he taps on my shoulder and tells me to slow down.
So slow down, slow down.
Now you read out loud. So what is it about hearing it read out loud that
Oh,
helps?
that is, I think that is one of the best pieces of advice anyone can follow, is to have their work read out loud while they are reading it, themselves, while the author's reading it, while the writer's reading it themselves. Hearing it and reading it at the same time is just a wonderful way of, number one, picking up typos, but number two, just hearing the rhythm of the work, making sure there's no repetition. I'm just a stickler for eliminating repetitious words in my paragraphs or in my passages. So like, he saw the door, he opened the door, he headed out the door, someone knocked at the door, he opened the door, door, too many doors. You gotta figure out a different way to say this so it's not repeating the same thing over and over again. Line length, if the line is the same length over and over and over again, 8-word line, 8-word line, 10-word line, 9-word line, 8-word line, it's going to be so boring. So boring. The rhythm is just going to put you right to sleep. So you got to alter the length of your sentence. You got to alter the rhythm. When you hear it read out loud, you can really pick up on that. And then a lot of times you're hearing it out loud, and suddenly, I'll say, wait a minute. That's not how he would respond. That's not what Sutherland would do in this situation, Or I'll say, holy. We can use 4-letter words in this thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. Safe
Okay.
space.
Yeah. Like, holy shit. I mean, how does he know that this happened? Nobody's told him this yet. There's no way he knows this information. Oh man, I got to go back and fix that, And it's only when I hear it out loud that I pick this up. Or, and Rita will tell me often, wait a minute. How does Alex know this? Alex doesn't know this. He wasn't there. Oh shit, you're right. Damn it, I gotta go back and fix that. So
And
yeah,
I've noticed that I think people are so scared to start this process of doing the writing because they're afraid of making mistakes and they don't realize that's part of writing is making mistakes.
Writing is jazz. Writing is jazz.
I love
You
that.
know, yeah. I mean, you just gotta blow that horn. You know, and when you make a mistake, you either run with it or you correct it. You know, a
Make
lot of
something out of
times,
a mistake.
exactly. A lot of the times, that mistake leads you to some of your best work.
As a kid, we had a little art class, and the lady, she always said, there are no mistakes. Make something out of it. Make something out of it.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times, like we'll get that situation where Alex doesn't know this happened. Doug, you idiot. Alex doesn't know this happened. Oh, damn it. Well, I got to go back and figure out a way then I either got to change this passage or I got to go back and figure out a way that he would have known this happened. And, it's a mistake. I got to go back but in fixing it, I'll discover something that really strengthens the book. Yeah. Alex does need to know this at this point. Well, how did he find out? So I go back and I fix something that I wrote earlier. And suddenly it's just a whole lot better and everything's flowing so much more smoothly now, So
do you think that this process of writing every day and reviewing every evening, does that prevent you from having a major change where you have to rewrite 500 pages or something?
Yes, absolutely.
You see?
Absolutely. Yeah. And also what it does for me is, and again, this is not for everyone. A lot of people have to write that whole first draft, leave the mistakes in, leave all the garbage, all the stuff that needs to be fixed, leave it all in, complete that first draft, get to an ending, and then go back and fix it. That's the way some people got to do it. But I tend to revise as I go, or I don't tend to, I absolutely do. I revise as I go. I start out every day when I sit down to write, the first thing I do is reread what I wrote the day before and what I've already gone over with Rita, right? I go back and reread that again. That gives me momentum into that day's writing. But also it kind of sets me up, lets me know where I'm going, and it helps me find, no, I needed to fix this. We didn't catch it last night, but it needs to be fixed, need to fix it. And then so I revise, and then I start writing. And then, the next day I revise what I wrote that day and start writing. So when I'm done with my first draft, I've really gone through a lot of revision already. I've gone through a pretty thorough revision already. So by the time I get to the end of that first draft, it's almost ready to go. It's not quite ready to go, but it's almost there. And at least most of the major mistakes that would require, 50,000 words of rewrite, those have been taken care of long before. And then when I do go back, because then I go back and I reread the whole thing from the beginning, and I make lots of revisions as I go. But it's usually just aesthetic stuff, cosmetic stuff, just fixing up how things sound. There's always typos. Typos are there forever. They're there after I publish. I still got typos. I discovered them years later. But I
was reading
quite
Harry
a few
Potter
of
one
them.
time and I found a typo. Yeah,
Everybody's
got them.
Yeah, everybody's got them. I find them in major published works. But I've pretty much fixed the major stuff already. And then Rita comes back and she reads the whole thing out loud from beginning to end. Takes us about a week, while I'm peering over her shoulder. I really do torture my wife. I mean, she has bad asthma. She has bad asthma. And reading out loud for extended periods of time is actually kind of hard on her. She's making terrible sacrifices for me, and I
you have to buy her dinner.
Yeah. Oh, I make her coffee.
There you go. That's all you need.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Make her coffee and make her tea. So
you fulfilled the contract.
And she says that's enough. So
that's amazing. That's so cool. Well, you guys seem to have such a wonderful partnership, and that really is rare.
Yeah. Oh, she's a great partner. She's just the absolute perfect partner. But anyway, so that's pretty much somewhere in all of that. You've heard my writing process. So
well, what I'm taking from this is, don't worry so much about doing everything right. Just do it. Just freaking do it.
Man, you can't have said that better. That is just the absolute truth. Don't worry so much about doing it right. Just do it. Make your mistakes. Correct them. Leave some in. Listen to jazz. There's lots of mistakes that they've left in that sound great. You know,
Well,
uh,
in this age, and it's so funny because recently I've been fighting a battle with, I've been kind of depressed over some of the AI stuff and the way it's been
oh
used and where it's
man,
going. And I
yeah.
think when you see human mistakes in the art, that's part of what humanizes it.
Oh,
This wasn't made by a
absolutely.
machine.
Yeah. Can you imagine jazz played by an AI? You
No.
know?
Oh, no,
Oh,
no.
it'd be horrible. It'd be
Right.
horrible. And
I
that's the
love
same.
jazz.
It's the same way with creative fiction, right? You know, AI is jazz without the mistakes. It's
Right.
jazz played
Well,
played by an AI.
it's just like when there was a vogue for all the auto tuning and all the singers wanted to use
Yeah,
auto tuning.
yeah,
And it's like,
yeah.
just have your voice.
Yes, yeah,
Be
yeah.
you.
Because it homogenizes art, right? So everything sounds the
Right.
same. And for some readers, I guess that's fine. They want to be able to predict everything that's happening, and they want everything to proceed. There's Prince. Hi, Prince.
Hello, Prince.
Hey, Prince.
One of
Cinderella's
your
my all
celebrity
white cat.
cats.
Yeah,
I
my
love that.
celebrity cat Prince. My
Instagram
all
famous.
my all white cat is Cinderella. She may pop in at some. Prince is going to open up our laundry room door here. He's pretty good at that. Yeah. Oh wait,
He's the
give me a
real author,
second.
right? You're just the front man.
Oh, there's
Oh, hello
Cinderella.
there. Hello, Cinderella.
There's Cinderella.
Oh, this is wonderful. The whole family. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, it
Another,
strikes me that
another
with
one of my
this,
another one of my co-editors.
a lot of writers I know swear by having a feline companion.
She's
So
not
there you
a
go.
she's not a very good editor. She walks over my keyboard and all kinds of weird words pop up.
It's jazz. It's
Yeah,
jazz.
it's jazz. It's jazz.
Well, it
Discordant
strikes me that
jazz.
in this sort of you describe the golden age of where you don't have to homogenize art, as you said, and you can find your tribe. You can find the readers who vibe with your individual
Right.
style, and
Right.
you can
Right.
ignore the
Right.
readers who are like, "Oh, but this isn't like the rom com that I wanted," or whatever.
Right. Right. Yeah, I like that because my general approach to writing is that I at least try very hard not to predict what other people will like. So I'm going to write the book that I want to read. And as somebody else put it, Benjamin Everin, I think, when I said this to him on Twitter, he wrote back. My approach is to write what I want to write, yeah. Which works out to me to be the same thing. But I want to write something that satisfies me, as a reader and as a writer. And then I hope and I trust that there are enough like-minded readers out there that other people will enjoy it too. But if you get into the trap of trying to predict what the trends are or what other people are going to going to enjoy, or even people who have written good reviews of my books, if I try to predict what they want me to do next, it's just not going to. First of all, it's not going to be much fun for me. It's going to be work, and if it's work, I'm not going to do it because I'm retired. I don't work anymore. So writing has to be fun for me, but also I would botch it up. There's just no way I'm going to be able to predict. You've written some good reviews of my books. If I tried to say, oh, I'm going to write something that Daniel is going to love, I don't know. I don't know if you will.
Well, I
I
think
just
these full audiences, they do not want to be pandered to. They don't want to feel
Right,
pandered
exactly.
to.
And also it would be the same old thing I've already written, right? I've already written that. So one of the problems with writing a series, and I'm 7 books into mine, which I'd never thought I would ever write a series. Every book I have started, beginning with the first, every book after that, I went into it thinking this would be the last book of the series. And yeah, every single time. And often I said it publicly. When I wrote my 3rd book, Hag Rises from the Abyss, so this is it. It's going to be a trilogy. Okay, I've written 2. I'm going to write the trilogy. That's it. And then now I've written 7 books. So, oh well, thank you for saying so. But
What pulls you back? What keeps you writing more? You seem to be pulled back into this world each time.
I get pulled back in, and I'll tell you something about that in just a second. But when I continue with this, but So I wrote every book thinking this would be the end because I didn't want to be repeating myself. I didn't want to write the same book twice. And when you got a main character who's a private detective in a specific fantasy setting, that's really hard to do. It's really hard
Yeah.
not just to write the same book over and over again. And so I think the reason that I decided to write another book each time was that I did have a new idea. I thought, here's something else that Alex Sutherland can do. And, it's a different kind of adversary. It's a different kind of case. It's a little bit different vibe. And so I did that 7 times, and I don't trust myself to be able to do it 8 times. So the 7th book is it. But now here's the other
The 7th
part.
book is the last one?
The 7th book is the last Alex Sutherland book.
Really?
Yes. But my new series, because as I said, I can't get out of this world, the new series, Shade the Collector, is going to take place in the same world. It's going to take place in Talonica, just in a city down the road, with a new main character. Okay. Benedict Shade. Benedict Shade, Shade the Collector.
Oh, that's a great name.
Yeah,
That's a great name.
I like it, and then I found that another author actually has a similar name. For
Well,
his main
sometimes
character.
good art will rhyme.
Yeah.
So what do you think, what led you to say, and I haven't read the 7th yet, so I'm very excited and I'm also sad, but also I get it. What led you to say, okay, this is a good place to end Alex's story and move on to something while we're finishing on a strong note?
While I've had these developments occurring in the background of all my books, right? Involving the elf and the dragon lords, and you know what I'm talking about. I put it into my first book to be background just to enhance the setting. And then Asaf Meir, who I mentioned earlier, told me he wanted to know more about that, and that would lead to a sequel. And I thought, really? You think I ought to write a sequel? And he said, absolutely. And so I did. I wrote Witch Steps Into My Office. And then I discovered when I wrote Witch Steps Into My Office that I really hadn't done a whole lot with that background. I had mentioned it, but I hadn't done much with it. And I thought, Asaf's going to be awfully disappointed. So, and also I had disappointed myself because I thought, I can't end it here. I've got to do more with that background. So I wrote Hag Rises from the Abyss, and that did a little more with that elf dragon background. And then I found that I had more to say about it. And so, I kept going. But with the 7th book, with Specter Raps on My Windowpane, okay, we go over here. Yeah. With the Specter Raps on My Windowpane. I didn't wrap up all the loose ends, but I did hit a major development. I hit a very major development in that subplot or in that background plot. And I thought, with that development, I don't really need to rush into an ending that likely wouldn't take place logically, the way the book proceeds, wouldn't take place for hundreds of years now anyway. And but I was still interested in that background, and I was still interested in this world, and I found I couldn't get out of it. So I had 2 ideas. My first idea was I would do like an epic fantasy, post-apocalyptic epic fantasy that would take place maybe 1,000 years in the future, but in the same world. Quetzalcoatl would still be there, the elf would still be there. So I thought about that, and I actually wrote down a few ideas for that. And then I came up with the second idea of having a character from Alex's own time continue the story, but from another perspective. And that's the one I went with. So I developed Benedict Shade the Collector. He's going to be based in New Helvetia, which is just down the road from Yorba City. And in the first book, Alexander Sutherland will appear as a secondary character. And I did Alex Sutherland from a first-person POV, and Benedict Shade will be a third-person POV. So I'll be able to explore a little wider range. And I was
going to ask about that. What led you to do? Because first person is supposed to be the hardest type for people to write in. What led you to choose that?
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard that too. I've heard first person's the hardest. I've also heard from readers who say they will never read a book in the first person. And I'm like, you do you. That's fine. I don't care. Um, I read, Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe is first person. Dashiell Hammett's Sam Spade is third person. So you can do noir either way. But I do kind of enjoy those narrative voiceovers in the noir movies, those first person voiceovers. So as Troll developed, from the very first sentence, there was a person talking in the first person, talking about this troll in the doorway, or a doorway at the bar. So it was first person from the beginning, and I just went with that. But I really enjoy first person. I enjoy writing in first person. But after doing 7 of those, I decided, let's switch it up. Let's stretch yourself. Let's try something new. So it's going to be a very tight third-person POV, and all of the POVs will be from Benedict Shade's point of view, but it will be written in third person. First person does have some limitations that third person eliminates, like a lot of the thought process that goes on in first person can be a bit awkward. Whereas in third person, it can be more observational, and also it can be more author narrative rather than character narrative. So
it strikes me that this is kind of like in movies, the movie cameras. Right. If you're watching a found footage, it's just one perspective as they're carrying the camera.
Right,
but the standard movie, you can see all the different characters.
Right. A lot of the actions of the main character in first person are very hard to do, because he'd have to be describing himself, right? And sometimes you can do that, but it's hard to describe a lot of the gestures, a lot of the little things, in first person. I reached up and scratched my nose, is more awkward than say, well, Shade scratched his head and said, such and such.
Yeah.
So third person kind of opens things up a little bit, and I can see where maybe that might be a little easier to write in. But on the other hand, I don't think first person is all that difficult to write in. So I keep telling myself I'm going to try second person one of these days, which would be a real challenge just to stretch myself. I might do a short story in it one of these days. That would be fun.
I always think of one of my favorite comedy songs. You're Walking in the Woods, the Shia LaBeouf song, where you're hunted down by Shia LaBeouf and you're fighting him for your life. And it's just this wonderful, I'll send you a link. It's Rob Cantor. It's a hilarious song.
I'm not familiar with it, so you have to send me the link. Yeah.
When people ask me what is second person, I just send them that song, and it's all in second person.
Yeah, there are a few songs in second person. I at one point I saw a list of them, and I've kind of forgotten them now. But Let It Be, I think that was one. You find yourself in times of trouble. When you find yourself in times of trouble.
Yeah.
I think that's at least borderline second person.
Right. Yeah. Well, so you become part of this vibrant community, and I'm curious to ask you what you're reading. But also, I'm curious, how long did it take you as you launched this book and you didn't know if anyone would even read it? When did it start really catching on? How long did that take?
It took a while, I'll tell you. I was actually looking at that data this morning, thinking that might be something we could bring up. When I wrote Troll, it took me... Well, at the end of the first year, at the end of 12 months, a 12-month period from the time I published it in November 2019 through October 2020, I had sold fewer than 100 copies, including Kindle Unlimited reads, the Kindle reads. Probably something like 80, 90 copies, something like that in my first year. And there were months where I sold 0, or I had nothing. And with the second book, things increased marginally. With the third book, at least the sales became steady. They still weren't very good, but they became steady when the second book came out. So I had very few days where I had 0 sales after the second book came out.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, can't make a living on it, but I recognize that given that self-published authors, the records for self-published authors, actually puts me up in a pretty good category, moderately
That's
successful
great.
category. And then with the third book, things started to take off exponentially. And then the fourth book, things really burst out.
Wow.
So
Wow.
and that was in 2022. So in 2022, I was in that 1 year, 2022, I actually made enough that I could have lived on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
But
great.
then sales have gone down since then. So,
Oh no.
but I would
Well, it sounds
still,
like that's a part of the flux. It's natural to
right,
have ups and downs.
right. And I would still consider myself to be moderately successful at this point. So I can pay my rent with my books. So
That's great.
yeah,
What do you think? What's the secret? Was it the social media? Was it word of mouth?
I have no idea. I really don't. I can tell you a couple of things that I've done, and I don't know if this is the secret or what worked or what have you, but I've been pretty consistent presence on Twitter, um, and doing more than just promoting my books. Although I do a ungodly amount of promotion on Twitter as well. Um, but but authors who come on and do nothing but promote their works on Twitter don't tend to get noticed very much. But if you come on and actually interact with other people, and there's a lot of great people to interact with on Twitter, and like I say, you can block the ones who aren't, so you can
Hmm.
regulate who you are interacting with. At least for now. If that ever disappears, then I'll disappear from Twitter. Once they take the block button away, I'm gone. But I don't think that's going to happen. At least I hope not. But there's a lot of great people to interact with, people who will help you promote your books, people who have more followers than you do, who will retweet your promos if you build a relationship with them. And I think that helped quite a lot. Instagram, I think, has helped. Especially, I think what really helped me on Instagram is that viral tweet that you mentioned, because once that came out, my Instagram following just went sky high. And I don't know how many of them actually see my Instagram posts, but I think even if it's just a small percentage, that's a pretty good audience to promote to. And then I use something called voracious readers only. Voracious readers only. And people subscribe to it, and they get free books. You have to give them a book for free. I gave them Troll, and they can subscribe to it and read it for free. And then voracious readers only will bug them to rate it, to write a review in Goodreads or Amazon. And the idea is, when you subscribe, you are told that not only are you going to be encouraged to put in a review, or at least a ranking, but also you will automatically go to that author's mailing list if he has one. And so with voracious readers only, I was able to build a reading list, and once
Wow.
a month I send a little little newsletter to them. And
Do you recommend that for authors to have a newsletter?
I do, but I have no data whatsoever that tells me it works. Okay, but it is something that I have done, and I don't know if it's worked or not, but I'm kind of afraid not to do it now, just in case it is
Well,
working.
well, and it strikes me, my gut feeling, my sense is that part of your success with the books and with talking to people, it seems that you're not afraid to be yourself. You don't seem like you're trying to portray a character. You're just showing up
Right.
and being you. And you
I
have not been
that's all I
shy.
can be.
Well,
That's
but you're
all I
not
can be.
shy.
Yeah.
You've broken one of the rules that is a silly rule.
Yeah.
Authors are told, don't be, how should we put this? Don't have opinions, don't be political,
Yeah.
don't stand up
Crazy.
against fascism. Can
Crazy.
you speak to that a little bit? Because you have
Uh,
spoken up for democracy and stuff like that.
right. It's crazy. You can only be yourself. If you're trying to be somebody else, unless you're just really a great actor who ought to be on stage and are being unfairly neglected, you can't be anybody but yourself, right? So you got to be yourself. I was reluctant to express my political opinions on Twitter because I am extremely opinionated when it comes, especially when it comes to politics. I'm a naturally arrogant person, which I think which is a benefit, I think. Um,
I've never heard someone describe themselves as a naturally arrogant person before.
I I think it comes out, doesn't it? You know, uh, there's no point in trying to hide it. uh, I used to tell my students, you know, I said, look, I'm arrogant. I'm a teacher. I've got to be. How am I going to control a bunch of unruly students if I'm not, you know, more arrogant than you are? Um, but yeah, so that, and I think it helps as a writer to be a little bit arrogant, quite frankly. Uh, it I know that, you know, um, there are people who have are on the spectrum, uh, people who have autism, sometimes severely. I know that there are people who have many very good reasons why they don't want to put themselves forward, why they don't want to express their opinions. I have nothing but respect for that. That's fine. Okay. Um, and I think a lot of those people are making it work. Okay? But that's not me. Okay. So I was reluctant to express my political opinions because I was, as a budding author who suddenly had some readers and found myself maybe wanting a few more and not wanting to alienate the ones I had, I thought maybe I shouldn't say anything that I know will offend some people, maybe a lot of people. And then I was interviewed by Stephen Golds for what's that publication called? Punk Noir, I think.
I looked this up.
Punk Noir, I think it's called. I was interviewed by him, and he asked the question basically, "Is there any opinion you want to express?" Something like that, and it just burst forth, right? And so
Wow.
I wrote down. This was a written interview, and so I wrote down this long diatribe against white supremacy and how this country has been founded on principles of white supremacy, and we've been a white supremacist country ever
Sure.
since. And we were starting to get a little bit away from that in recent years. We were starting to add some diversity, which I thought was a really good thing.
Right.
And then along came Trump, and that all went away, or at least it
Right.
was severely threatened and is in danger of going away. And I wrote all this, and it was out there, and
Wow.
then there was no hiding after that. So I still try not to devote myself to political arguments on Twitter, but
Right.
I will retweet judiciously to indicate, and people will figure out pretty quickly if they follow me at
Sure.
all where my politics are. I call myself a left coast boomer. That's my Twitter login name, the Left Coast Boomer. In my bio, it says that if you are a member of the MAGA cult, unfollow me. So I'm not hiding anything, but I'm not as expressive as I could be because that's not primarily why I'm there.
Well, you
But
keep
if,
it classy. You keep it tasteful.
well, I try to, but if anybody asks, I
Yeah.
am more than willing
Sure.
to answer.
Well,
Um,
it's crazy to me that that's even considered an opinion that people, and I feel it too myself, like there's a pressure not to share opinions, but it's crazy to me that we live in a historical moment where stuff I assumed was settled in the 1930s is now
mhm.
trying to come back.
Well,
That's what blows my mind.
that's the way of history, though, isn't it? I mean, you know, it moves like a pendulum, swings one way, then swings the other. I've been around long enough to know that the pendulum generally will swing back the other way if you give it time. We're in a period now where I'm not that confident of it, though. So unless you know, some of us take some action. So uh,
Well, I was going to ask, what would your advice be to passionate young people? And again, people from all different views, but I think basic human decency is kind of a thing. People who hold to basic human decency.
well,
What would your advice be for young people who are really stressed out about the way things are going?
yeah, I think a couple of things. One is I would advise people, and it sounds a little weird given what I've talked about so far, but I would advise people to resist being so tribal on one side
Hmm.
or the other.
Hmm.
I'm very opinionated, but on the other hand, I'm also perfectly comfortable around people who are diametrically opposed to me
Interesting.
with their opinions. I shared an office with a woman while I was teaching at my last school, and she and I had some very interesting and very civil conversations, despite the fact that we were totally, completely, diametrically, politically opposed to each other. And she was,
Wow.
I used to coach the JV softball team, and she was my assistant softball coach. So,
Oh,
um,
wow.
so we could talk about things we had in common, and of course, we did have things in common. We could talk about politics, which we did not have at all in
Wow.
common, but express our views and put them on the table and say, we're not going to agree on this, but this is how we
Wow.
feel. Yeah. And we had a we're able to be perfectly civil about it, perfectly civil
What
relationship.
what happened to that? Because I don't see that happening. I don't see
It,
people talking
it
to each
wasn't
other.
happening much at the time either. And it's getting worse and worse. But it can still happen if you don't insulate yourself so completely on your
Hmm.
own side.
Hmm.
You know, if you're
So
willing
the
to
echo
listen,
chamber effect.
exactly. The echo chamber effect is big. It's big now.
Hmm.
You know, people
Hmm.
don't want to
Hmm.
hear anybody else's views. And here I am blocking people on Twitter who disagree with me, right? So it sounds like it's hypocritical. But I don't live on Twitter. Twitter is
Hmm.
only one tiny aspect of my life. And in
Hmm.
my outside of Twitter, I relate to people in
Hmm.
a different way. Um, there are still people I won't let into my living room, but it doesn't generally have to do with their political views. It
Well, it
has to do
strikes me
with a
that
lot of other things.
well, but I think that's getting to the core of what we're talking about. I think my generation and younger especially has lost the differentiation between my phone screen and
Hmm.
reality,
Yeah,
and
could be.
lost the
That could
ability to
be.
go talk to someone at the grocery store
Yeah.
as a human being, and that's real in a way that my phone screen is not. You see?
Yeah, I wonder if that's true. I think maybe it is, and I think that's a terrible development if that's the case, and I fear that it might be. I stopped teaching in 2018, and since then I haven't talked to a lot of young people. It's just the
Sure.
nature of things, right? My friends tend to be older. The people I run into tend to be older, and I don't have long conversations with young people anymore. But at least not many. Um, and I wonder if things have become even more tribal than they have been in the past. Tribal is my word for it. People insulating
Sure.
themselves into groups. And it's always been there. We've always been this way. But interaction used to be more possible, I think, or I fear that it is now. And that's a bad thing. That's a bad thing. I think breaking down those tribal barriers is one way of, improving things. Uh, Unfortunately, I think it also leads to greater diversity, which the other tribe doesn't seem to be a big fan of.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
uh,
Sure.
and in my opinion, I think much of this extreme tribalism that we're seeing today originated with the right wing tribe.
Hmm.
Many of them may argue with me, and that's fine, but that's the way I see it. But I think that the left wing has followed suit and said,
Yeah.
"Okay, you're not gonna listen to me. I'm not gonna listen to you, and we're just gonna insulate
Yeah.
ourselves in our own groups, and that's the way it's gonna. Then we'll just bang heads." Yeah.
Right. Right. I would so agree with that because I was raised in a very right wing tribal context, I suppose. And then college age, I set myself free, right? And I went super far left. And then I started seeing what I've seen termed horseshoe theory in real time
Uh-huh.
among people I knew.
Yeah.
People being so tribal and hateful and
Uh-huh.
mean and
Yeah.
cruel to
Yeah.
people who, and that's just not, I don't think good things come from that.
I think one advantage I had, and I call this an advantage, is that my parents were in different political parties. So my mother was a Democrat, my father was Republican, and so I heard
Hmm.
political arguments all my life.
Wow.
From people who lived together very civilly. So
Wow.
yeah, so we kind of learned how to do that. And I have two sisters, and my sisters and I do not agree politically, but we get along very well. Uh,
Wow.
they pay to read my books, and I'm very grateful for
Wow.
them to them for that. Yeah. So but politically, there's three of us, and we're on three different sides. So,
Do you think that's because you have a strong enough ego, a healthy enough ego that is not threatened by someone disagreeing with you?
well, I
For
certainly have
example,
I certainly have a secure ego. That's for sure.
and that's not in a negative way, because I think a lot of
Yeah,
us were socially and culturally there's a negative on that. But I think if you
yeah,
can have a healthy ego that's not, what's the word I'm saying, always threatened by someone disagreeing with you,
yeah.
maybe that would reduce some of this stuff.
Well, I agree. I just don't know how it's done.
Sure.
I've just always had a very strong ego for whatever reason. Maybe I was born with it. My parents have strong egos. My sisters have strong egos. We're all very egos. I don't want to say egocentric, but very strong in our own beliefs and our own identity. Um, to the point where we're not threatened. I don't think any of us are threatened by people who identify in different ways. Um, I can be uncomfortable with somebody else's identity or beliefs, but that doesn't mean that I can't be friends with them. Um, and
Interesting.
and it doesn't mean I have to share, uh, their identity if it's not mine. Uh, but on the other hand, I'm very curious about it, and I enjoy hearing about it because because one of the things I think teaching history teaches you this too. Teaching history or learning history, it teaches you about the diversity of human beings. Human beings are a very diverse species, just by nature. And history is essentially the history of ideas. And ideas come from all different kinds of settings and characters and peoples and cultures.
Just last night, I was I'm going through Will Durant's story of philosophy,
There
and
you
he kind
go.
of gives
Yeah,
a wonderful
yeah,
survey of the ideas that have, for the past 500 years, shaped all of these cultural conversations.
yeah, exactly. And, setting plays a role, biology plays a role, just people's experiences play a role, but we form different identities.
Hmm.
And they can be, excuse me, they can be radically different. But they're all very interesting to me as a historian. I don't want to just teach the history of one set of ideas. I wanted to teach the history of a number of sets of ideas and compare and contrast them and show the advantages and disadvantages and mainly how they were products of their particular milieu, their own culture, their own experiences. Um, and
We're also in a time where, when you try to have that kind of rational conversation with people, people are scared to change their minds and say, "Oh, I think I was wrong about that. I
well,
think I embrace this new view."
yeah, exactly. And a lot of that is because changing your mind means changing a piece of your identity.
Hmm.
And people who are not secure in their identities
Hmm.
are afraid to modify them. And
Hmm.
if you're secure in your identity, then you can accept certain modifications and call it growth or call it
Hmm.
development. But a lot of people have decided who they are, and they're clinging to it, desperately against all opposition, against all obstacles, and so they never grow, they never develop, and that's not necessarily a good thing, in my opinion. I also have this other theory about maturity, which is that by and large, people have decided who they are by the time they're about 18, maybe even earlier, but certainly by the time they're about 18, 19, they've decided who they are. After that, they just act in the way that they believe other adults act, or they act in the way that they believe adults are supposed to act. And they call that growing up, where in fact, they've clung to their 18, 19-year-old identity. They've clung to that for their entire lives. And and I've tried not to be that kind of person, but I fear that in a great many ways, maybe I am. So,
Well, what you say reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Bertrand Russell, who really impacted me as a young person. And he said, he was criticized for changing his mind over the decades on certain questions. And he said, "A man who thinks the same thing at 87 as he did at 27 has wasted his life."
exactly,
And I thought that was
I
kind of an
totally believe
yeah.
that. Totally believe that. And in my own mind, I'm kind of funny about that. Rita will say, like she said, you ought to try Instagram. Oh, no. Yeah, that's not for me. I'm far above that kind of social media experience. And she's so good about it. She won't argue with me. She's like, oh yeah, I see. Okay, well, if that's the way you're going to be, I'm enjoying it. But that's me. That's just me. You probably would. You probably shouldn't. You probably shouldn't do this. Next thing I know, oh yeah. Well, I'll give it a shot. I'll hate it, but I'll give it a shot. And oh yeah, I can see this. Yeah, I can see this. All right. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It almost strikes me, maybe that's part of how we can try to talk to each other culturally too. It's like we
Yeah,
scream at
maybe.
each other when we disagree.
Yeah.
Why don't we
Should be more
just share
subtle.
where we're at?
Try
Yeah.
a little subtlety. Try
Right.
a little subtlety. Trying to explain things.
I love that.
Explain
love that.
things without trying to persuade. Explain without trying to persuade.
I love
that's,
that.
That's
And
a better
be kind.
approach. Yeah. The
Yeah.
other thing is, I mentioned that I was a salesman for a while. I wasn't a great salesman, but I went to sales seminars, and one of the things I learned was the best approach to sales was to try to discover what the person you're trying to sell to, the client, the potential client, try to discover what it is they need. Right? Not what you want to sell them, but try to figure out what it is they need. Try to discover that by asking questions. And then when you discover what it is they need, then try to tailor a product that meets that need. And if they need it and you're offering it, then that's pretty persuasive without you having to really hit them over the head with a hammer. So,
Right.
so
I love that.
if you're trying to find common ground with other people, try to find out about them, find out where they're coming from, try to find out what their hopes and fears are, and what their obstacles are, and then try to relate with them on that level. Try to find some common ground on that level.
Empathy. Empathy.
Yeah, try to develop
No-
some empathy.
Not just fear, because there's so much fear right now in the rhetoric
Yeah.
on all sides.
Yeah. Because right now it's
I love
just
that.
people trying to hit each other over the head with hammers, and most people are resistant to that.
Which I'm an advocate of. That's my political party. We hit people over the head with hammers.
They hit people over the head. Hit people over the head with a hammer party. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think I've seen that party. Yes. Yeah.
Well, so Douglas, listen, we're going to have to do this many more times. I hope to have you on, and I hope to someday when I have a TV show, I hope we can have you into the studio.
Oh, that
and
would be
get
so
you
much
in.
fun.
But
Are you going to do TV?
Eventually, I hope to. I hope to.
Oh,
I'd love to. We want to
would love
manifest,
that.
like they say. We want to manifest that.
Well,
But-
look at me. I'm telegenic. I'm telegenic.
Well, it's funny because
I'm telling you.
I'm trying this. We're trying this new Riverside.fm is the product, and the way it works is it does local recording that it then later will upload. And because it's a live stream, you're very pixelated to me. So I can only kind of see your
really?
shirt, and I can kind of see.
Oh, no.
So I can hear
Oh,
your
no.
voice very, very well, but I can't see you as clearly. So I'll be watching on the recording. I can actually see your face, which will be great.
Oh no, my Rita and my cats are going to be so disappointed.
Oh no! Well, no. When we publish, it's all going to be fully resolved because the
okay.
local recordings will
Okay.
update.
All right,
So,
there we go.
yeah.
There we go.
But so just so we can keep in mind, so you've got a new series coming out. When does it launch?
Oh boy, that's a good question because I haven't written the first word yet. But
Come on, Douglas, catch up. You
I
gotta
know,
get it done.
I know,
No, I'm kidding.
I know. once I get the problem is, and you were asking me about books that I'm reading now, and right now I'm reading John Gwynn's books, the Bloodsworn trilogy books.
Oh, I've heard those are good.
Shadow of the Gods, I finished, and I'm reading Hunger of the Gods right now, and they've totally engrossed me. I'm just totally hooked. I've fallen down that well, and I can't get out. Fortunately, his next book doesn't come out till October. So once I'm finished with this, I expect to be done with this book by the end of next week. And then maybe, although there's so many other books I want to read, but the writing urge is strong in me right now. And once I'm done with Hunger of the Gods, I think by the end of next week, I think I'll start writing. And
Oh, that's exciting.
once I start writing, my usual pattern is that I'm pretty much done with the first draft within about 4 months.
Wow.
So let's say I start roughly April. So April, May, June, July. So I might have a first draft done by the end of July. Let's say August. Yeah, just to be on the safe side.
And I'm going to hold you to that. In August, I'm going to be holding a copy of your book, interviewing you.
That's why I'll be making weak excuses, but and then the editing and beta reading process begins, and that takes a couple of months. So let's say August, September, October, November to be on the safe side. If I have a book out in November, that would maybe give it a month. Maybe say December. A month for pre-order and promo. So let's say December 1st. December 1st would not surprise me. January or February wouldn't surprise me either. But I am hoping for December 1st. Yeah. So we'll see.
I just have this idea in my head. Like, if you ever got an offer from HBO or from Netflix or something, do you see any of your stories going onto the screen?
Not a chance. There's only one way that would happen. Okay. And it's never happened to anyone before, I don't think. Okay. First of all, they would have to give me full approval over everything that appears on the screen. I wouldn't write the screenplay myself, but I would have to have a full final approval of the screenplay. I'd have to have full final approval of the director, all of the actors, probably the set design.
Oh, but this happened with Terry Pratchett. He used a smaller independent studio.
All I have to do
on Discworld. Yeah.
All I have to do is be as big as Terry Pratchett.
Yes. Go watch The Color of Magic on Amazon Prime. It's got Tim Curry in it. And he got to have full approval of everything.
Actually, I think I did. I saw that. Yeah.
It's got Sean Astin, too, from Lord of the Rings.
Oh, yeah. It was great. Yeah, I did see that.
So it could happen.
Could happen. All I have to do is be as big as Terry Pratchett. Yeah. Or
that day will come.
Or Neil Gaiman. If I can be as big as Neil Gaiman.
Oh, my God. I love Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, who doesn't, right? If I can be as big as they are, then maybe you might see my stuff on Netflix Prime. But if they're just
2 to 3 years. 2 to 3 years.
Right, yeah. maybe Benedict, maybe Shade the Collector will take off. Maybe that'll do it for me. But until that happens, if anybody were to come along and say, hey, we want to buy the rights to your book, okay, not happening. It's just not going to happen.
Okay.
I could not bear to see any work of mine being altered in any way I didn't approve of. That's just my ego. Yeah. That's my ego speaking. That's my arrogance. That's my arrogance speaking.
And I will shoot myself if I don't mention.
no amount of money would do it either. Yeah, I don't care. Hang on to your millions. I don't care. All right.
Don't sell out. Don't sell out.
No, it wouldn't happen. I don't need.
That's amazing.
That's
amazing. I'd love to see Johnny Depp in one of your films or something. I don't know, some of my favorite actors. We'll see.
I've got Social Security. I've got retirement. I've got some, fairly moderate residuals coming or royalties coming in. I don't need the millions. Don't need it.
That's a strong position to have to negotiate from.
It's absolutely.
Who would the actor be to play Alexander Sutherland? I have to know. Like, if you could
I thought about that. The problem is, at 72, I'm kind of out of touch with young up and comers. I would want it to be somebody young. But in my mind, I have some people who, when they were younger, would have been okay. And I'm forgetting the names. Did you ever see the one? Tremors with Kevin Bacon, the actor who co-stars with him. He's very famous. He died fairly recently. I know everything about him but his name. When he was younger, he would have been perfect. Right?
I'm going to watch Tremors now just to see the actor.
Oh, Tremors is a great movie. Yeah. And he would have been great. And then the guy in oh gosh, see, this is what happens when you get a little older. The guy who Pierce, he starred in. Oh gosh, how much time do we have here? I'm under pressure.
Oh, time. No, there's no pressure. I can Google too. Pierce Brosnan? No.
He starred in that first Christopher Nolan movie, Memento.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Guy Pearce.
I saw that.
Guy Pearce.
Yes.
Okay. Now, not Guy Pearce. Not Guy Pearce. Okay, although he would be great, but he made another series called Jack Irish.
Oh, okay.
Jack Irish, which is like my favorite television show and movie combination ever. There's movies and there's a TV show, right? Jack Irish, I just
Okay.
love it. Well, in that series, there is an Aboriginal who is works with this gambler, and he also had his own show set in Australia, in the Australian the interior of Australia. So
Oh, like in the Outback.
yeah, the Outback. See, I'm starting to lose words now. Um, he had his own show, and I can't remember what it was called, with Judy Davis. Okay, that actor, whose name I can't remember. Okay, when he was younger, he would have been ideal as Alexander
Look
Sutherland.
this up now.
Yeah, yeah.
Jack
Look up
Irish cast.
Jack Irish.
We've got Guy Pearce. We've got Roy Billing, Aaron Peterson,
Aaron
Damien
Peterson.
Garvey.
Aaron Peterson, I think, is the guy.
Aaron Peterson. Okay.
So you got dark
okay.
hair, dark
Yeah.
features.
Dark beard. Yeah.
Yeah,
mhm,
that's him.
mhm.
That's him.
Yeah.
When
okay.
he was younger, he would have been ideal. Physically, he would have been the ideal Alexander Sutherland. Kind of a big guy, not a handsome face, but a rugged face, dark features. He can when he looks at you intently, he can kind of intimidate you. It's kind of intimidating physically. That would have been perfect. Yeah.
Right. Because that's the thing about Alex Sutherland. He's not, the Arnold Schwarzenegger, the biggest, strongest guy, but he's got that spiritual toughness. He's made of iron, It's there's something about him.
Yeah,
He gets it done.
You can't beat anything out of him. And many
Right.
have tried. Many have tried.
Right. Oh,
Yeah,
what was in one of the books where he's? I think there's a troll and then there's a guy and they've got him tied up in like a metal shipping container or something. They're trying to beat out of him some information. He has to call Badass for help and stuff.
Yeah.
That was really, really cool.
That was, which one was that? That might have been Witch, right?
I think that might be right because it's a Leah. I think it's a Leah agent.
Yeah. Gosh, I can't
I'll have to
remember
go back
now.
and reread it now.
Yeah. This
That's
is
cool.
I have loved every decade that I have lived. Every decade's been better than the one before. But I will have to admit, now that I'm in my 70s, sometimes information gets a little bit fleeting. So
Sure. Well, and the thing is, we're inundated with much more. I tell people the gigabytes of information per day that you have to suck in is so outrageous.
well,
And our
fortunately,
parents,
we have Google,
yeah.
right? Fortunately, we
Right.
have Google.
Yeah.
We can look it up.
You have to.
Yeah.
Because if you look at our Neolithic ancestors 30,000 years ago, and you told them how much information per day we're supposed to memorize and know,
Right.
it's just
Yeah.
insane. There's
My,
no way.
I have my old college roommate. When I went back to college when I was, 20 years old, right? My old college roommate. We lived together for like 2 years, something like that. I have lunch with him every Thursday. He lives about 20 miles away from me. And every Thursday I go to where he lives and we have lunch. And we sit around and we discuss things. And our conversation basically is, yeah, you remember that guy. You remember that guy. He was, or we'll be talking sports. We'll be talking sports. Yeah. The quarterback for Cleveland Browns in the 1970s. Yeah, you remember. Yeah, he had blonde hair. His number was 12.
Pretty soon we're all gonna have chips in our head with the AI, and it'll just tell us instantly.
So he does like almost no social media whatsoever, and barely even uses the internet. And I have my smartphone with me constantly, and he'll say, "Look it up, Google it."
Right.
So we'll be together 2-3 hours, for lunch, and that's our whole 2-3 hours is just Googling the stuff.
Oh, I love that.
That has
like trivia.
escaped our memory.
Oh, well, I just thought of the one thing I forgot. Shout out to Peter Hartog, is another outstanding author.
Oh,
He actually appeared
absolutely.
with us on a conversation.
Yes,
And
yeah.
he's just so cool. We have to have him
Yeah.
on soon, too.
Yeah, he's gonna have a book here pretty soon, and I'm on it.
I
I'm in
hope
it.
so.
I'm in it. I don't know what it's
Are you
about,
in it?
but I'm in it. No, I'm in on it. I mean, as soon as it comes
you're
out,
in on it. Oh.
I'm there. I'm there. Yeah, no, I'm not in it. No, not to
Yeah,
my
if you like
knowledge.
sci-fi, he
Not
writes
to my
very
knowledge.
good sci-fi.
Although I put
Yeah.
you in Blood Moon, didn't I? At least I put.
Oh, there's a reference to
I
the
put
character
a
gets his name
reference.
wrong. Sonderling. He says Alexander Sonderling. No, it's Sutherland. That
Yes.
made me happy. And Duffy, a reference to Duffy Weber, who
I
read
put-
your audiobooks.
I put Duffy in there in a way
Yeah.
that I didn't tell him I was going to do it, and the way I put him in my book is not necessarily something he would have asked for.
It's an unusual character.
but knowing Duffy as well as I do, I knew I could get away with it. So I put him in, and then I didn't tell him about it. And of course, he narrates all my books. So for Audible. So he was narrating, he's narrating, and then he comes to his name and character. And it just blew him away. It blew him away.
That's amazing. What did he say?
Well, in the acknowledgments, in the Audible version, I had written something like the reference that I used Duffy. The Duffy in my book is not the Duffy who is narrating this book, and I wrote, and I hope he doesn't sue.
No.
So he added a parenthetical in the acknowledgments, telling me how much he enjoyed the reference, and no, he had no plans on suing. So,
that's amazing. So wait, you're saying he doesn't turn into a swarm of? Well, I won't ruin it.
No, don't ruin it. Don't ruin it. Yeah, no spoilers. No spoilers. Yeah, no spoilers.
Well, if I could just ask you, I usually close interviews even for my main job. If I could just ask you one piece of advice for the ages, if we could just hand you the microphone and the bully pulpit, what would your advice be, especially for young authors right now?
Yeah, I think the one I would start with is one that I've already mentioned, and that is write the book you want to read, or as Benjamin Everin said, write the book you want to write. To me, that's the same thing, because I want to read the book that I want to write. To me, it's the same thing, but you can resonate differently, with different authors. But in other words, write for yourself. Write the book for you, okay? And trust that there's going to be people out there who think closely enough to the way you think, or who respond closely enough or in a similar way to the things you respond to, that they will want to read it too. Right? I think that's number one. I think that's most advice you get from other writers is total bullshit. Okay. But that one I think works for everyone. Okay. Don't try to write for other people. If you try to write for other people, number one, it's not going to be as much fun. And number two, it is really hard to do. It's easier just to write for yourself, and then let the people who think closely enough to the way you think, let them gravitate to you, or put your book out there and let them find it. Right? Don't say, I'm going to write this book for Daniel Brown. Okay, I'm going to write the book that Daniel Brown wants to read. Well, I've read Daniel Brown's books and they're wonderful. Okay, but I don't think I can write them. It's two different styles. The style is too different for me. I don't think I can
be clinically insane like me. So that's a good thing. But
and if I tried to make myself that way and tried to write it, I'd never be able to duplicate it. It would be an inferior product. Yeah.
So it's like those Hollywood blockbusters that flop because they're just trying to write. They're trying to
rewrite it. They're trying to rewrite to it, or they're trying to write to a test audience, or they're trying to rewrite something that was already done by somebody else. And you're inevitably going to write something that's inferior if you do it that way. And it almost, how often does that work? Occasionally it does, but how often does it really work that the remake is as good as the original? The percentage is low. The percentage is low. So write the book. I think that's number one. Number two is have another source of income. Because most people don't realize when they first start to write how few, percentage-wise, relatively few writers actually make a living at it. Even successful ones often have to have another source of income in order to make it work. If you think you're going to come out and be Stephen King right out of the gate, it's possible, but the odds of getting struck by lightning are probably better.
Right.
So don't be discouraged by that. You've got to be persistent. Sure. I think that nothing advances you as a writer helps you get your writing done, nothing is more important than persistence. Not intelligence, not talent, not nothing. You know,
That's
um,
huge.
yeah,
That's
persistence
huge.
is huge. You have to just push through it. You just have to work through it. Um,
Mhm.
and you have to do it in a way that doesn't bog you down. You have to free yourself from the things that are keeping you from pushing through. Um,
Mhm.
Clearing your mind by going outside and moving, walking, running, that works for me. Other things may work for you. Some people have said that some people who bodybuild, I know that you are not unfamiliar with weights. Um, and some people say that
Absolutely.
bodybuilding is a freeing kind of activity. But
Bobby
that's
Fischer used to lift before his competitions.
who did? Who?
Bobby Fischer before his
Oh, yeah.
chess competitions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go. There you go. Yeah. Um, Meditation works for some people. Doesn't work for me. I can't sit still
I,
long enough.
I've
Can't,
tried it. It is, I don't get it.
yeah, yeah, me neither. All it does is put me to sleep. Uh,
Yeah,
but
same. The closest for me for meditation, or people talk about going to church for religious people, I guess, but
yeah,
would be for me going to the gym or some kind of physical activity.
right.
That's where I
Yeah,
get to the Zen state that they describe.
yeah. Physical activity outside works best for me. I do a minimal amount of weights. I do curls. I do squats just in the house with some dumbbells that I got laying around, just to keep my old bod in shape. Um, but I don't think that works as well. Although I used to belong to a gym and I would get ideas when I was in the gym sometimes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it used to be really annoying because I'd be trying to do a count, trying to count
Yeah.
the curls. And then
Yeah.
suddenly an idea would hit and I'd be thinking,
Oh no.
oh man, I don't know where I'm at in my count. How many reps have I done? Is this my second set or my third set? I can't
When
remember.
you stop finding a typewriter, start writing the idea down.
Yeah, need to run
I
out.
love that.
Yeah. And
One of my
I
favorite Isaac Asimov stories was when he was stuck on a story without fail. It would come to him in the middle of the night.
yeah.
He'd wake up, sit bolt upright, wake his wife up. She'd be like, "What's wrong?" And he'd be like, "I just solved it.
Yeah.
My book where I was stuck. I just solved it." And then he'd go back to sleep.
And lose it.
No, he kept it. That's
Oh,
the thing.
good.
He kept it
That's
till the
excellent.
morning. That was the weirdest thing.
When that happens to me, and it has happened to me a few times, when that happens to me, I have to immediately get up, go to my computer and start writing down some notes. Yeah. Or even get into the story. Sometimes the idea is a revision I need to make. And so I'm there at 3 a.m. and I'm making my revision.
Wow.
Yeah. And that has happened to me on more than one occasion. It's one of the things that not working frees me up to be able to do. So, yeah. Hey, I don't sleep at night. I'll sleep in the morning. I'm not working. So
Although
I'm very,
having had
very
such
fortunate.
a broad, well, but having such a broad and diverse career beforehand, I see these characters that you're writing, the insurance salesmen, the investigators, the criminals. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I feel like
yeah.
those are people that you met in your travels. You
Yeah,
know?
they're compilations. They're combinations of people that I've met. I have a few. I have a few that are directly modeled on people I knew. One in particular that I can think of. One of the if you've for anyone who's read which one now? Hag, where I have the 4 trolls in the car.
Yes, the security.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, the 4 security guys who are working for Fulton. Yeah, I got
And Fulton, what
3.
a great villain, by the way.
Oh, I love him, and he's in New Helvetia, so I suspect he will show up and shade the collector.
Oh,
But
I
yeah,
hope so.
It's 3 trolls and Gordon,
Yeah.
who's human. Yeah, one of those 3 trolls is modeled directly on someone that I grew up with,
That's funny.
who's no longer around to sue me. So, and
So it's safe.
and he's the most objectionable of the 3. So,
This is why they put in no resemblance to persons living or dead, right?
yeah, right. Yeah, you betcha.
Well, and I got to say, one of the most interesting, strangest things as I'm reading your stories, for me, it comes across the believability. Alex really does face some serious darkness, and he rubs shoulders
Yeah.
with some seriously bad people.
Yeah.
And I think for me, what I love about the books is it's a tale of resilience. It's a tale of facing the darkness. Christopher Hitchens used to write about George Orwell, Eric Blair, and he used the term the power of facing. And that was something
Yes.
George Orwell talked about. And I think Alexander Sutherland has the power of facing the deepest darkness and somehow coming through.
Yes.
And that speaks to me, especially in our times for some reason.
Yes. And when you read Specter, you're going to see a lot of existential nihilism in it. And he's going to have discussions with a certain other character. I'll leave that open for you to read about. But he'll have some discussions on whether death has more meaning than life. And I was fascinated by the whole idea and really enjoyed writing those particular passages. So we find him facing a darkness that he is actually at least considering succumbing to, and has to be talked out of it. And there has to be a reason for him to reject the darkness and to accept life in its place. And I really, really enjoyed that passage. And I've had some experiences with talking people out of suicide, and not pleasant experiences for me or for the person who was that depressed at the time.
Sure.
But experiences that really stuck with me. And I have nothing but admiration for people who man those suicide prevention hotline phones. Man.
Yes.
Just hats off to all of them. I have my deepest
They're like
respect.
angels.
Yeah, absolutely. And just having had the sort of layperson experience with that, it's a scary experience, and an experience
What
that
do you
really
think
stuck with
helped
me.
in that moment? What helped you talk to them?
Listening, trying to find alternatives, trying to find something in their life that was worth keeping. But I am not an expert, so nobody should regard me as one in these matters. Although I was successful the times that I tried.
That's great.
Yeah, and in one case it was pretty hairy there, but experiences like that, over the course of my years, I mean, people are going to run into variations of darkness. Can't help it, and learning from it, I think, is important, and finding ways to stand up to it, I think, is important. So, and
What would you say? None of us knows, and I've talked to people from so many different walks. This thing that we're in, that we call life. What is it? What's the purpose of it? And we all have different guesses and dreams and half dreams. Is this a dream? What's your big takeaway? What's your big philosophy of life, I guess, as you approach this mystery?
My big takeaway is the existentialist one, to a degree, which is that life has whatever meaning we give to it, because it has my belief is that life has no inherent meaning. There is no inherent purpose for anyone's life. That's my own personal belief. You can share it, you cannot share it. That's fine with me. This is what gets me through the day. So if you're going to, but I don't find this pessimistic. I find this optimistic. I find it very liberating. If there is no specified purpose, if there's no specified meaning, that frees you to develop your own meaning, to find your own purpose. And with that freedom, then you can reach out and examine and experiment and find a meaning that works for you. A purpose that satisfies you. Aristotle said that essentially, and using an Aristotelian word, when I use essentially, you pick that up. That's the intellect. When I say essentially, that's an Aristotelian word, right? But Aristotle said,
I love that.
Essentially, that the purpose of humankind was happiness. That was the
eudaimonia, right?
Pardon me?
Eudaimonia, right?
Exactly. The purpose of human life is happiness, and he had a lot of, deeper meanings for happiness than we do when we say it. But essentially, purpose of human life is to be happy, and everything else that you desire for the sake of happiness. You know, you desire wealth because wealth makes you happy. You desire love because love makes you happy, etc. But happiness you desire for its own sake. You desire happiness because you want to be happy. You know, so that's the end goal. That's the ultimate potential of humanity, and the purpose of humanity is to achieve happiness. Now, Aristotle said you can't actually be said to have achieved happiness until we can examine your entire life. You know, if you say you're happy now, what you really are is fortunate, because what you have can be lost. But at the end of your life, then when it's no longer something that can be lost, then we can determine whether you actually achieved happiness or not. But I like to simplify it and say that the purpose of human life is happiness. Your purpose of you as a human species, as a member of the human species, is to be happy. Then it's just a matter of figuring out what kinds of things truly make you happy, not just a temporary, bout of joy, with consequences, but
telling us to buy things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they'll make you happy for, 15 minutes or so, but then you got to pay your bills, right? So you find the balance, you find the things that give you some lasting happiness, and you kind of orient your life in that direction. It's very simplistic. It's very simplistic, but it works for me. So that's my meaning of life, right? Happiness is the meaning. And then, as Jefferson, a good Aristotelian, wrote into the Declaration of Independence, right? We have the right to the pursuit of happiness, which he picked right out of Aristotle. And
sure,
it's something, I think it's the most important thing in that entire document. So,
which kind of gets to the core of what I used to call myself liberal, but now the word means so many different things that are weird to me. But the old-fashioned meaning of that word for me is, you should be free to pursue your happiness. I should be free to pursue my happiness.
Right.
Let's not hurt each other.
Yeah. That's what it originally meant. I still call myself a card-carrying liberal just to piss people off.
Well, I think Gore Vidal was on a talk show one time, and someone told him, "Oh, well, I'm liberal." He said, "You're not a liberal. Do you know what that word means? Liberal. It literally means freedom. Do you support freedom? You want to control people."
Yeah.
That was very interesting back in the 80s or something.
I think for the most part, libertarians have sort of misused the whole concept of liberal. But again, my opinion.
Right.
Yeah. But
just be. I love Will Wheaton. Someone asked him, "What is the golden rule?" And he said, "Don't be a dick."
Yeah,
that's all you need. Just don't be a dick.
That works for me. You can start with that and then maybe improvise. But words lose their meaning, right? Words change their meaning constantly. Every word changes its meaning as through usage, and the word liberal has certainly changed its meaning over the years, over the centuries. Yeah, I mean, at one
that's
time,
why we need the arts.
At one time, yeah, I absolutely agree. And don't get me started. We'll be here for a long time. But liberal, yeah. At one point, liberal meant that you opposed monarchy. It was very simple. You were a monarchist or you were a liberal, right? And if you supported monarchy, then you were not a liberal. If you opposed monarchy, you were a liberal. Well, in America, a place with, at least to this point, no monarchy, the word liberal became more refined in meaning, and the word conservative became more refined in meaning, because for a long time, at least, neither liberals nor conservatives in America supported monarchy. I think that's changing, but maybe liberal will regain its old meaning, as anti-monarchist.
Sort of the slide towards autocracy, maybe just under different names.
Right, exactly. Well, autocracy, monarchy, it's close enough to make no difference.
Basically, bullies are bad. Let's not have bullies.
There you go. Yeah. Unless they're the bullies doing the right thing, right? Yeah. So,
right. Oh, yeah. Well, then you have Voltaire, who was so in love with Frederick II until Frederick II went off the rails, and then he was in exile.
Voltaire is one of my favorites. I
love him. Yeah, oh, my God. He was so brilliant.
My favorite take on Voltaire is that he felt that the greatest of all evils was fanaticism, regardless of the cause. And I think Voltaire had a major point there. Fanaticism in any cause is bad.
My favorite quote from him relates to that. It was adapted from Will Durant years ago, the first time I read through. Adapted from his letters on the English, where he single-handedly popularized Newton's physics to a European audience. While he was in exile, part-time studying physics. He was that brilliant.
Exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But there's a quote where he says, uncertainty is uncomfortable, but certainty is stupid.
Yes.
And I was like, I'm writing that down. I'm keeping
Yeah,
that. That is so important.
It is totally great. That's why I want everyone to assume that everything I say with ultimate authority is strictly an opinion. So
The most confident people you meet are generally setting off bombs or raising armies to go destroy people.
right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I used to
Adolf
always
Hitler was a very confident man.
I used to always tell my students, don't in your papers, do not write that anything you are stating is an opinion. Write it as if it's a fact. We assume it's an opinion. Okay, as a reader, as an intelligent reader, we're assuming that's your opinion. Unfortunately, when you do this out loud to a group of people, as I am wont to do, people are not assuming it's my opinion. Instead, they're just assuming that I'm an arrogant son of a bitch. So, but everything I say
Well,
is,
and you also
is
need
an
to
opinion.
have a reason behind what you're saying, and that's so
Sure.
rare because people will spout off something they read on Reddit, and they're like,
Yeah.
this is the way it is. And you
Yes.
ask them why,
Yeah.
and they just stare at you.
There's a lot of that. Yeah, do your own research, right? Means find people on Reddit or TikTok who agree with you, and then hold that up as support for your opinion. So that's
Right,
the
and then you
that's,
get in.
that's what do your own.
That's where you
research
need
has come to mean.
evidence-based, the academy. That's where you get into science and peer review.
Right.
That's where you get into primary sources, knowing how to do research. And my
Right.
biggest pet peeve, you got me on my biggest pet peeve about the so-called AI. It's not actually thinking. It's not ratiocination.
No.
It's just predictive text.
Right.
But what are the sources that it's looking at? You don't know.
No.
So you could ask it, what should I think about X? Well, how do you know what sources it's using to tell you what you should think about X? And I think that's very risky when you have mega corporations that have an omniscient AI that's going to teach people. Well, how objective is it being? How do I know? That's why I like reading old books. That's why I like knowing the old ideas.
Especially if AI is scraping from TikTok and YouTube and just a random selection of literature, it's just coming from all kinds of suspect sources. So,
And
there you
there's
go.
new information that we haven't discovered yet. There's new scientific discoveries that haven't been scraped yet.
Right.
Those are valuable truths that we won't find unless we know how to think for ourselves. And that's why I love Christopher Hitchens. I disagree with some of his later stuff, but his earlier writings where he said, he really impacted me, but he said, don't teach people what to think, teach them how to think.
Yeah.
And I think a few people have said that.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valuable piece of advice in the field of education, to which I would add, make sure that your students are well grounded in basic facts. So I think that because you can take that, don't teach people what to think, teach them how to think, you can actually take that to an unhealthy extreme, where you get to the point of, I'm not going to teach you anything. I'm just going to direct you toward Google, tell you, think about it, go to Google, find your own answers. And that is an extremely unproductive way to think, because that's basically teaching people to recreate algebra, from scratch with no basis. So I would have to, I think it's very valuable. Yeah. Teach them how to think. It's a very valuable piece of advice. And I would say, don't teach them what to think. Okay. But teach them enough facts that once they know how to think, they'll know how to, tell a good fact from a suspect fact, or a good opinion, well-grounded opinion from an opinion that's not well-grounded.
I think that's the core of this weird propaganda war on two extremist sides, where people are just throwing alternative facts at each other.
Right.
And they're just saying, well, I have different facts.
It's because they have become fanatics for their own tribe. And like Voltaire said, avoid fanaticism for any cause.
I love that. Yeah. And be willing to always question even yourself. There's still people in the classroom. Question everything, question me.
Isn't that the scientific method, is to question every one of your conclusions?
Well,
when
it's
you
supposed to be, but
supposed
it's
to be.
instructive when you study the history of science, how
Yeah.
rarely that's true, because the
Yeah.
establishment is against plate tectonics. So for decades, they resist plate tectonics because it's
Right.
not fashionable. And then when enough people die, they give him a Nobel Prize or something. Like,
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Because there's always some committee somewhere that's directing the thought. So it's hard to be an
right.
independent thinker even in the world of science these days.
Well, I love it. Well, Douglas, listen, we need more of you in the world. So clone yourself post haste, whatever you do. This step one. I can't wait to read your new book, and I'm super excited that you're starting a new series. I can't tell you. This is big news.
Well, the thing I hope in that reading my work is that you become very inspired to write your own next book so that I can read it. Because I'm
Thank
dying
you.
to
I
see
hope so.
I'm dying to see more. Dying to see
I've been
more.
stuck, man. I've been so stuck. I have stacks of notes where I have all these ideas, but I'm terrified because the ideas are so cool until you start putting them down. It's like, I don't want to screw it up because it looks so cool in my head, you know? And you talk yourself out of it.
Send it to me. I'll beta read it.
I will. You'll be my first beta reader. I
Yeah.
love that.
And I'll tell you right off the bat that I'm a harsh beta reader.
Uh-oh. I'll be crying.
Hey.
Mascara. Uh-oh.
I'm a former teacher. I'm a former teacher.
With a healthy ego.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
I love that. You'll toughen
But-
me up.
but-
Well,
I'll run my comments by Rita, so she'll soften the blow.
she'll censor you. She'll
That's
humanize
right.
you. I love
That's
it.
right.
I love
Yeah.
it. Douglas, thank you so much for this, for being so generous with your time. We'll have to do this again.
I've loved it.
And
It's been great.
please tell Rita, next time if she wants to hop in, we'll get her take on her side.
Absolutely. I mean, she's a far more interesting guest than I would be. So
And listen, your book, the next book is called A Specter Wraps on My Windowpane. Am I getting that right?
A Specter Wraps on My Windowpane came out March 4th.
I love that. I love that. Get it on Amazon or wherever you get your books. I can't wait to read my own copy.
Excellent. Can't wait to hear what you think
Awesome.
about it. Can't wait to
I
read one of
love
your
it.
can't wait to read one of your excellent long reviews.
Well, I'm going to try to figure out how this software works so we can actually get this conversation to the masses so we can build on your fame, build your following. And I'll be in touch just as soon as we go live.
Excellent. Can't wait.
Chat soon. Take care.
It has been wonderful talking to you again, Daniel. Anytime.
Always a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.